News, CIWW, 1310 AM, Ottawa, CJET, 1011 FM, Smiths Falls and the Valley. City News time, 9 o'clock.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, June 9th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now with scattered rain in Ottawa, 13 degrees, in Smiths Falls, 14. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. A 29-year-old cyclist in hospital in critical condition this morning after he was struck on Greenbank. Paramedics received the call from Greenbank at the 417 overpass just after 6:30 this morning. Now, the cyclist had suffered multi-system trauma. Paramedics performed advanced life support measures on the man. Then he was rushed to hospital. Police do have Greenbank closed in both directions along that stretch for their investigation. City News time, 9:01. There is an overwhelming task of restoring home and property for some following the storm on May 21st. Those people will find some fees for things like demolition permits have been waived at City Hall. With the details, here's City News reporter Chris Curries.
Council voted to suspend demolition and building permit fees, as well as fees for accessing historic building permit records and civic number blades. The storm will also be a popular discussion point at Council's next meeting in 2 weeks, as city staff are preparing a report on rules around backup generators in residential high-rises and gas stations. The city's GM of Planning, Steve Willis, said they've been scrambling to understand the rules around generators.
The reality is that there are different rules for generators in buildings depending on how old the building is. And so if a building was built in the 1960s, it was under one set of rules. If it was built in the 2000s, it has a different set of rules. So in all likelihood, we're going to find that we're going to need to go to the province to get some sort of harmonization of the rules.
Mayor Jim Watson also pointed to difficulties residents had getting gas while the power was out, and to others who were left stranded in upper floors of buildings. Chris Curries, City News.
City News time, 9:02. Now your forecast. Here's meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Such an unsettled stretch of weather for us. You'll need the umbrella at times today. The high just 18 degrees. More showers tonight near 12. And tomorrow, cloudy showers, even some isolated thunderstorms, a gusty west wind, and the high about 22. For today, the high 18.
And right now with scattered rain in the region, 13 degrees in Ottawa, 14 in Smiths Falls. Gatineau police fear there could be other victims of sex assault around the National Capital Region after one person came forward claiming they were sexually assaulted by a 39-year-old Montreal man. Following the initial complaint filed this year, charges were since laid. Now, that person charged with other crimes across Quebec, and police believe he uses the Facebook dating site to contact victims under the name Amin Dillon and generally targets single-parent or vulnerable women. Police say in the initial stages he comes across as very polite, charming, and showing a lot of interest. Then he extorts money and sexually assaults women when they meet. More on this story, including the suspect's picture, go to ottawa.citynews.ca. Most remaining mandatory mask rules in Ontario do expire on Saturday. Masks no longer required on public transit and many healthcare settings starting at 12:01. Now, the province's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Kieran Moore, says the decision was based on high vaccination rate in Ontario and improvements in the COVID-19 situation. Masks will still be required in long-term care homes and retirement homes. Now, Ottawa Public Health, the mayor, and OC Transpo says they're recommending people still wear a mask when on board buses and trains after Saturday. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Good, bad, or complicated.
There's no news in Ottawa and the Valley he won't talk about.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
1011 FM and 1310 AM.
You won't believe what I have to say today. No, seriously, 44% of you won't believe it. But more on that in a moment. Good morning. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show on City News. Another busy day around here coming up on the program. I'm really looking forward to this. You know, we have a research facility here in this city called Area XO. The truth is out there. Area XO. It's operated by Invest Ottawa, and a big focus for Area XO is autonomous vehicles. The term they use at Area XO is CAVs, Connected Autonomous Vehicles. Now look, there's a lot of buzz right now about electric cars. Because of the price of gas, that's natural. People are looking for money-saving alternatives, and maybe if they find something in their budget, that could mean an electric car in the driveway. The industry's moving that way in a big, big way, right? Some automakers like Volvo, Ford, they've already said in a decade, we're not even going to be selling any cars with any internal combustion engines anymore. And governments are moving to phase out the sale of vehicles with internal combustion engines. So I heard an interview yesterday, and I wanted to follow up with someone in the industry here locally. And we have a great expert coming on, actually joining us from a big auto show in Detroit this morning. Someone I heard on the radio yesterday said, electric cars, yeah, that's one thing, but what you should really be paying attention to, because the next thing is going to be the connected autonomous vehicle. You know, the car that drives itself. And this is what they're working on at Area XO. This person that I heard, Kathy Wood is her name, ARK Investments, well-known ETF, said this could be a multi-trillion-dollar market. And that companies like Tesla and Google has a company called Waymo, they are spending big, big bucks to make this stuff of science fiction a reality. There's another company in California called Cruise. We actually have a friend of our family works for that company, Cruise, in California. So look, if Ottawa is at the forefront of this, don't you think that's going to be that could be a good news story for Ottawa? We're going to dig into that a little bit this morning. The car that drives itself. Kathy Wood said yesterday, these self-driving cars could be all over the place by the year 2030. 2030 is just, what is that, 7.5 years from now? And the idea, one of the business models is you're going to subscribe to a ride. You're going to subscribe to a driving service. The same way you would subscribe to an internet service provider. And you're going to say, hey, Siri, come and get me. I need to go to school now, or I need to go to work, or I'm going to the grocery store, I'm going to hockey practice, whatever. I don't know how realistic that is. Elon Musk, we have a clip of Elon Musk here, of Tesla. 5 years ago, he was at this governor's conference in the United States, and he was asked about the future of the autonomous car. This was 5 years ago. And he said then that 20 years from now, most of the vehicles on the road would be fully autonomous. So by the year 2037, we have that clip? Let's play that clip.
But if you were to say go out 20 years, overwhelmingly, things are electric, autonomous, overwhelmingly.
Fully autonomous?
Fully autonomous.
So no one will have to touch the steering wheel if there is one?
There will not be a steering wheel. In 20 years, it will be like having a horse. People have horses, which is cool. But
so having a regular car will be like having a horse. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. And there will be people that have non-autonomous cars, like people have horses.
That's cool.
It just would be unusual to use that as a mode of transport.
Yes. All right.
That's the way he speaks. It will be unusual to use that as a mode of transport. Okay, I don't know. Who knows, right? It's Elon Musk. But if it's accurate at all, Ottawa would seem to be at the forefront of it. So it excites me. It excites me. Also on the show this morning, another look at some of the big news stories in the world with Elliot Tepper. Professor Elliot Tepper is Distinguished Senior Fellow, Norman Paterson School of International Affairs at Carleton University. And today, one of the stories I want to ask him about is Russia using food as a weapon. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, again, will dominate our discussion. But grain now. You have one of the world's largest exporters of grain in Ukraine, and it is accusing Russia of stealing Ukraine's grain stockpile and then reselling it. Russia denies it all, but a lot of grain from Ukraine is usually exported to African countries, parts of the Middle East, and already in some East African countries. We talked about this earlier in the week with our good friend Jeffrey Johnston from the Kingston Week Standard. You have countries like Kenya and Somalia and Ethiopia suffering through a terrible drought right now. The United Nations World Food Program says up to 20 million people in East Africa could starve to death. And the situation in Ukraine is it's adding to the misery. We also have this Summit of the Americas happening in Los Angeles, California. It doesn't look like Mr. Trudeau had any problems getting through Pearson. Just kidding. But yeah, Mr. Trudeau's there. And today his focus will be the price of gas. Again, just kidding. No, it's climate change. Climate change. Trudeau meets with the governor of California today, Gavin Newsom, along with Canada's Minister of the Environment, Mr. Guilbeault, one-time Greenpeace activist. He sure gets around, doesn't he? It's going to be some kind of announcement about fighting climate change while Mr. Trudeau takes heat at home for not doing anything to help Canadians offset not carbon emissions, but the rising cost of living. The rising cost of living. Even the governor of California is cutting checks. $18 billion worth of inflationary relief from Governor Newsom was announced back in May. A relief package that included a $400 check for every eligible registered vehicle owner, capped at 2 checks per individual. $800. Not so for Mr. Trudeau, who seems quite content to fly to the other end of the continent while Canadians back home struggle to pay for food and fuel. And as well with the professor this morning, big time, prime time event tonight. Broadcasting live from Washington, D.C. It's the first of what will be 8 televised hearings of the House Select Committee on the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Most of the American broadcast networks, all of the cable news networks, save Fox News, have cleared their primetime lineups to air these hearings. No Law and Order for you tonight. They are billing them as the biggest thing since the Watergate hearings of 1973. What did the president know, and when did he know it? Locally here, some interesting news 1 week after the Ontario election. It was a week ago today. QP Briefing reports Ottawa Orleans MPP, recently re-elected, Steve Blais, former city councillor, is thinking about running for the Ontario Liberal leadership. The Ontario Liberal Party, quote, "I didn't leave a fairly senior position at City Hall just to sit in the background for 2 years or 6 years." So we're trying to follow up on that this morning. We've called Mr. Blais, and we're just waiting to hear back. But yes, since the Ontario election concluded, with a big win for Doug Ford and the PCs, there's still lots to talk about. Most of it having to do with the future of the opposition parties, the Liberals and the New Democrats, leadership questions, maybe a merger. We will talk provincial affairs right after the 9:30 news. And the Talkback Hour. It comes up between 10 and 11 o'clock. 44%. 44% is a number that's been stuck in my head since the earliest hours of the day. When I read a new survey from Abacus Data here in Ottawa, 44% of Canadians think much of the information we receive from news organizations is false. 44% think the news is false. And you know what? It's not just people on the right. People on the right are more inclined to think the news is false. False is such a strong word. False. Not skewed or biased, just false. False. But 1 in 3 liberals think the news is false. 1 in 3. It's much higher for New Democrats and even higher for Green Party members. And almost everyone who supports the People's Party, like 9 out of 10, supporters of the People's Party think the news is totally false. So, yeah, I want to take some time and ask you about that today. 44% of Canadians think the news is false. Would you believe me if I told you this is the Rob Snow Show on City News?
Are you for or against us? We are trying to get somewhere. Looking around for a helping hand. We're doing our best to keep it steady. Stop it falling down around us. Armed around each other's shoulders, we go everywhere. Are you in? Are you out? Are you in? Are you out? Are you in? Are you out? Do you care to dance about and shout? John Jack and the boys being a band on a one-night stand. We'll be dancing in the floodlight. Second to none, not even on a bad night. We'll be dancing in the floodlight. Second to none, not even on a bad night. We'll succeed where others failed and stay together many years and watch us take the world by storm. Are you in? Are you out? Do you care to dance about and shout? Don Jack and the boys being a band on a one-night stand. We'll be dancing in the floodlight. Second to none, not even on a bad night. We'll be dancing in the floodlight. Second to none, not even on a bad night. Are you for or against us? We are trying to get somewhere. Looking around for a helping hand. We're doing our best to keep it steady. Stop it falling down around us. Arms around each other's shoulders, we go everywhere. Are you in? Are you out? Are you in? Are you out? Are you in? Are you out? Do you care to dance about and shout? John Jack and the boys being a band on a one-night stand.
Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News,
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Welcoming back to the Rob Snow Show on City News, author and post-media columnist Randall Denley. Good morning, Randall Denley.
Good morning, Rob.
Your most recent column in the Ottawa Citizen is among your most powerful ever, Randall Denley. It is about the inquest underway in Pembroke in Renfrew County, looking into the murders of Natalie Warmerdam, Carol Culleton, Anastasia Kuzyk, and the most recent ruling from the Supreme Court of Canada on consecutive life sentences for those who commit multiple murders. What's your opinion of that Supreme Court ruling?
I think it was a big mistake, Rob. 11 years ago, the government of Canada passed a rule that said, look, we're going to change this law where if you kill one person, you get 25 years. If you kill 10 people, you get 25 years. I agreed with that at the time, and we didn't see it changed by the subsequent Liberal government, which fought this in the Supreme Court. So I think there's certainly a political consensus, and I think a societal consensus that you need an increased punishment for killing larger numbers of people. And I look at it from a victim's perspective. Basil Borewski kills 3 people. If he killed 1, 25. Kill 3, 25 under this recent Supreme Court ruling. So, from the perspective of all the families involved, well, okay, he doesn't get any punishment at all for killing my sister, my mother, my cousin, whomever it is. How does that make sense? But, the justices of the Supreme Court, from their great elevation, have an obvious distaste for a situation where they would be effectively giving real life imprisonment to somebody. Borewski got 70 years. He's 64. So under the former rules, be pretty sure he's going to die in prison. He may well anyway. But that's just not the kind of society we are. The focus should be on rehabilitating people, or at least offering them the hope of rehabilitation. And if you look at Borewski's long and colorful record of abusing women and defying the courts, there's no hope of this guy being rehabilitated based on anything he's done prior to his killing spree. But I think the Supreme Court justices just find it distasteful to be agreeing with what seems like an American kind of penalty. Bound up the sentences, give him, more years in jail than he has left remaining in life. We just don't do that here. You have to go back to it and say, well, why do we have 25 years in the first place? It's kind of a random number. It could have been 20, it could have been 30. But to put somebody in jail for 25 years, that's okay. But you put him in jail for, say, 40 years. No, that's too much. Cruel and unusual punishment, according to their view of our charter rights. That to me is completely in the realm of opinion. How much is cruel and unusual punishment? 25 is okay, 40 is too much, based on what, really?
It's also this 25-year time frame to apply for parole. It's what that does to the victims' families after the 25 years is up.
That's a key point, and we think of Paul Bernardo, I guess our most famous imprisoned mass killer. He's eligible for parole now, so he's already been through 2 appeal processes. The families have to show up, relive the whole thing, argue that Paul Bernardo shouldn't get parole, which has seemed, self-evident to most people, but still they have to go through this, keep reliving all the pain of their daughter's death. It is a ridiculous situation, and I find that the Supreme Court decision hypocritical too, in a key respect. And if you look at Bernardo, he's got that faint hope of parole. Who really thinks he's ever going to get out? But we're okay with that. That's fine. We're offering the faint hope. So what difference does it make? If you've been sentenced to 70 years in prison, well, you wouldn't be going through this process. Good for the victims' families. Result for Bernardo, same in the end. I don't really see a scenario where a parole board is very likely ever to look at somebody who's a mass murderer and think, he was pretty bad back then, but, he's just taking some classes in prison and gets along well with the inmates, and we think he's got real hope out there. We should put him back in society, see how he does. That's the way to go. Who would ever want to own that decision? Mm-hmm. So I don't really see it happening.
And as you say in your column, some buck passing here, too.
Oh, yeah.
Because the onus, it's not the Supreme Court justices that will be hearing Basil Borewski's parole hearing. That'll be the parole board, the members of the parole board.
The ones who have to enforce the cruel and unusual punishment of keeping this guy in jail or any of the others, there's about a dozen of them, keeping them in jail longer than 25 years. Yeah, let's let the parole board do that. Then we don't have to dirty our own hands by endorsing this. It also overrules decisions made by the trial judges who heard all the facts and chose under the law that was democratically passed that say, yeah, this is a case where I feel that we need to make these sentences consecutive. So it's not just kill one, get two free. No, you're going to pay a price for each of those lives you took. To me, it just seems like a rational way to approach it. It's too bad for mass murderers, but I don't care.
Yeah.
If you're the kind of person who does that sort of thing, you spend the rest of your life in jail. I don't think that bothers the average Canadian. But now we're in a position where, because it bothers 9 Canadians sitting on the Supreme Court, now the government has to come back with a different approach. And if it does, that might work out. But does this really feel like an issue the true liberals are going to tackle?
No. Read that column, everyone. A very powerful column in the Ottawa Citizen this week from Randall Denley. I must ask you, it's been a week since the election. Lots of speculation now about the leadership of the other two parties. Steve Blais, the former city councillor, Ottawa Orleans, Liberal MPP, won in a by-election and then re-elected a week ago. Pretty convincingly as well in Orleans. Liberal stronghold says, look, I didn't come here to sit in the back benches. I might take a run at it. What do you think?
Then he should have run for Conservatives. I guess he would be sitting in the back benches. I think Steve Blais is likely a candidate as any. And to me, their leader has to be one of the 8 elected people, because you can't go now potentially 4 years with a leader who isn't in the legislature.
Okay. Doesn't
have the ability to stand up and question the government. That just doesn't make sense. So to me, it's got to be one of the 8. Clearly, they're not all going to run. He would be on anybody's short list. And he was a competent city councillor. It's a big jump from competent city councillor to party leader to premier, I would think. But he's a smart guy. I'll give him that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Randall Denley.
All right.
Yeah, we'll talk soon. Yeah. Read him in the Ottawa Citizen this week, everyone. Post-media columnist and author with his new book for sale at randalldenley.com. That's Randall Denley. Ontario politics this week, 1 week since the election. That comes up right after the news. I'm Rob Snow, and this is City News.
In Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, June 9th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now with scattered rain in the region in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 14 degrees. And here's what's making news this hour. A cyclist was taken to hospital in critical condition this morning after being struck by a vehicle on Greenbank Road. The cyclist was crossing the 417 overpass just after 6:30 when he was struck. Paramedics say he was treated for multi-system trauma and taken to hospital. Day 2 of the Summit of the Americas shaping up to be a busy one for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. After meeting with the American President Joe Biden and the California Governor Gavin Newsom, Trudeau will push for urgent action to confront climate change, another key factor in fueling out migration and looking for funding initiatives to help developing countries in the region. The high-stakes hearings on the January 6th attack on the Capitol in Washington underway later today. Members of the House Committee holding their first prime-time hearing. This will basically take over your TV tonight. Efforts culminated in the deadly storming of the Capitol. Then President Donald Trump was trying to overturn results of the 2020 election. Now, part of the committee's mission has been to determine Trump's actions on that day. City News Time, 9:31. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's time for Ontario politics this week. Our political analysts have returned, including Andrew Brander, Vice President, Crestview Strategy. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, Andrew. And Lindsay Maskell, Liberal strategist and former advisor to Premier Dalton McGuinty. Good morning, Lindsay Maskell.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah, I hope everybody's doing well and and you've all recovered from the election, which was, as I say, 1 week ago. 1 week ago today. Andrew Brander, why was voter turnout so low?
Good question. Look, I mean, for weeks we were on this show talking about how each leader was going to have problems in motivating people to the polls, and more than that, not just people, but motivating their individual bases. Let's start with Del Duca. Never resonated with voters or his own people. There was a choir of Liberals who were uninspired by his leadership and sat this campaign out. For the NDP, as Lindsay pointed out time and time again, fourth campaign, and yet again defaulted, halfway through the campaign back to this position where she was campaigning to be opposition leader. And, as Lindsay said before, also on this show, campaigns are a job interview. You don't inspire confidence in people when you go to a job interview to be CEO and just repeatedly keep saying, but, if the job of receptionist is available, I'll take that as well. With Ford, he had a different problem in that people liked him, but, they didn't like a lot of his decisions. And I saw this at the doors in Brampton, small business owners, people who were opposed to mandates and did not like the way that he kept restrictions in place for as long as he did.
Right.
Ultimately, Tories did a better job in overcoming that. But, that really comes down to the fact that they, tried to neutralize themselves on pretty much every issue. And that ultimately, that strategy ended up paying off for them.
Okay. I caught Corey Tonight on the Hurley Burley podcast this week who said, look, it's easy. People were satisfied with the government. There was no big appetite for change, so there was, not much enthusiasm to get out to the polls, as opposed to a change election where people, would be motivated. Let's get rid of these people. Let's kick these bums to the curb. I can't wait for the vote. That was very much the mood 4 years ago. Maybe not this time around. But, Lindsay, what do you think? Why was voter turnout so low this time?
Yeah, it definitely was not a change election. In fact, it has a similar feel to an election the last time voter turnout got below 50%, at 49% in 2011. But there is something that I loved about that election so much that has a similarity, which is that that sort of better angel on your shoulder of voters who thought Dalton McGuinty deserved another chance, right? That it is in our instinct to give people a chance. There was a big media narrative about the change of Doug Ford and Doug Ford being this new man sort of through the pandemic, and really reminding people that about the things that he did, like removing people from his caucus who did not get vaccinated, being for, trying to be the best. No, it wasn't the best, but was not the worst on on our safety through the pandemic. Right. So it has a similar feel to that election that had a low voter turnout, and again, just not a change election. When we've had change elections, we've gotten voter turnouts, as high as 68% federally when we got rid of Stephen Harper, and 58% when Doug Ford first won to get rid of Kathleen Wynne. So, there wasn't that desire, but I don't disagree with Andrew at all, right? There was a tough road for the Liberals to break through, and people, do want to vote for somebody that they know and feel a likability to. Yeah. You also have Andrea had a real challenge, and the NDP brand as a whole does when you think about the fact that Jagmeet Singh's brother couldn't win his own seat in Brampton. Yeah. So there's some interesting outcomes when you get down to the ridings of some things that we need to look at as individual parties.
Yeah. Yep. Well, Brampton was a real battleground, wasn't it, this time? They spent a lot of time in Brampton. All the parties spent a lot of time in Brampton. PCs did very well. Didn't they win all the seats in Brampton? Andrew?
They did.
They won all the seats in Brampton, right?
That's right.
Jagmeet Singh's brother. The NDPs have another really good, another MVP that was really good there. Sarah Singh, yeah. I thought, geez, if Andrea Horwath ever leaves, Sarah Singh she should run for the leadership, but now she doesn't even have a seat in the ledge now. So
there were a lot of three-way races in Brampton, other than the one riding. They really were three very. How
many ridings are there now? 4 there or 5?
5, actually.
Yeah.
5. Yeah.
When Harper won his majority in 2011, he won his Conservative Party won all the seats in Brampton too. So yeah,
that's right.
Okay, the Ontario Lib Dems, the Liberal Democrats of Ontario, has a nice ring to it. It has a nice ring to it. In an interview with the Globe and Mail, former Ontario Minister of Finance Greg Sorbera said, "If I could wave a magic wand, and given that both opposition parties are without leaders, I would be advocating that," and this is rather controversial, "that each of the parties dissolve themselves and enter into a merger that would create the Liberal Democratic Party of Ontario." He added, "I confess, it's pie in the sky." So, Lindsay, look, you're the Liberal. What do you think about this idea? Merger.
So I don't agree with that for a number of reasons. First of all, I love Greg, but I also loved that, he'd have one amazing, brilliant idea, but it would take a handful to get there, right? So he is a person who always has lots of ideas, lots of brainstorming, loves to put out provocative ideas to cause discussion. But there's a couple of things that I would say. First of all, personally, when it comes down to, for a lot of centrist Liberals, when it comes down to thinking about the finances, I've partnered up with the NDP on a campaign before. I'm not sure I'd have them do my own taxes. So, there's different, variables that, the big tent centrist Liberals believe in that we would be worried about the NDP having sort of what their effect on that would be. The other thing is Liberals do know who they are, right? There's a lot of this, who are we? Well, we were in power for 15 years, less than a decade ago. The Liberals currently hold power in our federal government. They got the second largest amount of votes in this election. That didn't translate to seats. But when the parties put out the numbers of number of volunteers, the number of doors they hit, the Ontario Liberals ran basically 3 campaigns to the NDP's 1 campaign. We have a muscle memory, a ground force that is there and strong, and needs a leader to drive and inspire and reinvent that. Whereas the NDP have sort of been all over the place in platform. Like, it was so bizarre to me that, one day, and to see Andrea doing the same thing as Doug Ford, being out standing in front of a bunch of cars and all over the place on platform. I think they've struggled for a long time about who they are and their own infighting. So I think there is.
I don't know.
There's some challenges that I would disagree with that.
But just let me interrupt here. When I heard Del Duca's talking about, I'm going to tax the billionaires. I mean, that's right out of Jagmeet Singh's playbook. That could have been, Jagmeet Singh could have been saying that. We're going to go after the rich, and we're going to have the rich pay their fair share. I don't know, Lindsay. There wasn't much difference to be heard during this election campaign, I think, between Liberals and New Democrats. That was part of the problem. Both parties were pitching the same message.
Yeah.
Fishing in the same pond. If Lindsay wants to respond to that, then I get Andrew's take on it. But
I think that the one thing I would say is the Liberals have had, we've for a long time had a position on, as well as the Democrats, about taxing our richest, most fortunate Canadians and Ontarians. So that has generally been a position, but I do believe that the NDP have tried to both go a little bit, have gone further to the center and further to the left to try to get a bigger vote margin, but then created an identity problem for themselves, particularly in areas that have a huge labor representation, that felt some identity to wanting to have that party represent them and have a voice. So I just think I think that they have been too all over the place.
Okay.
Where I do agree that in the 2018 election with Kathleen Wynne, there was definitely a shift to the left, and we were punished for that as well.
Okay. Andrew, what do you think?
Exactly.
The Lib Dems.
Look, I think this is, to be honest, this is exactly where my head went on election night. I do think it's worth a conversation, if nothing more than these moments. Politics, timing is everything, right? These moments don't happen often, where a party has a massive clean win. It takes out 2 leaders of parties that have some shared interest. And I think it's at least worth the consideration given the opportunity. So I'll put that out there. It's how it happened federally for the Conservatives. It's how it happened in Alberta for the UCP. So I don't think it's worth just dismissing off the top. But I agree with Lindsay. The reason it won't happen is because of how Ford has positioned himself, so cemented himself so squarely in sort of the middle of the spectrum. I think you were hearing it a little bit in Lindsay's voice there. There's a lot of Liberals who saw the tactics that their campaign was employing in this particular election to target and win back NDP seats, but they were not fundamentally okay with what was a pretty dramatic shift to the left. If that were proven to be more foundational and less about, picking up some NDP seats, I think a lot of them might consider flocking to Ford PCs if a merger were to take place, a formal merger. So I think, as Lindsay points out as well, a lot of Liberals realize it's really not the seat count is quite shocking and stark for the Liberals, but I do think most of them realize It's not as bad as it seems.
Really? It's not? It's not?
Well, it's not.
Cow. I don't know.
To be honest.
Where is this party without Ottawa? Where is this party without Ottawa?
Well, I think I said this a week before the election, which is the problem with the Liberal support is, inch deep, but it is still a mile wide.
Okay.
And there is broad appeal. A few more percentage points would be able to credibly cement them, at least in a place where they were trying to spend the entire campaign, which was convincing people that they were positioned to be at least opposite.
Like if I was a New Democrat, and they're going to take my advice, I would be thinking, the Liberals? Why would I want to join the Liberals? Like, the Liberals, that horse is headed for the glue factory. The Liberals, they won, how many seats? 8? We don't want any part of that. One more election, they'll be done. They'll be gone. We'll be the only game in town to oppose Doug Ford. No way would I join them. Although I do like Greg Sorbera. You know what? He always had style. I love it. He was kind of old school with the rose and the lapel, Yeah. I once asked him, "Are you going to sell the LCBO, Mr. Sorbera?" And he said, "Why? Do you want to buy it?" All right, look.
Rob,
sorry. Yeah. Come on, Lindsay. Yeah.
One thing on that, which is, of course, at one point, you'll remember Andrea Horwath didn't win party status, and the Liberals actually gave them party status to still be in this mix.
Oh, come on. You're looking for charity now?
No,
come on.
I'm not on this. They had been the dead horse, but also remember under their voting proposal, the Liberals would actually have more seats based on the model they think we should send people to the House on. So the vote share actually is an important thing of what a party can rebuild on.
Okay. When we come back, we'll talk about leadership. And Doug Ford needs a cabinet. Whose star is on the rise and whose star is fading? When we come back, Rob Snow Show, Ontario Politics This Week. This is City News.
Big crowd here tonight at the Ottawa Civic Centre, the OHL Championship Game 6. Two of the best face-off men in the OHL meeting right here at the Civic Centre. Zenon Konopka against Stephen Weiss. And we're underway as John Zion grabs it, gets across the blue line. Quick shot right on. Zep, no problem. High off the glass, back to center for Ottawa. Sellers, pass up to Bauman. Gets bumped off the puck by Wisniewski. Puck off.
Talking earlier today that sometimes in big games it's a lucky bounce that can decide things. Was he ever right on this play so far? Watch Sozanov going the opposite way. Just take a whack at it. Look at Talbot strip the puck from Oosterdahl. There it is in front of the net, and Sozanov gets a piece of it, and it goes in behind Rob Zepp. Bowman carries the puck up the ice. Then Talbot strips him, and there's Sozanov, who outwins the assignment with the back-checking Damian Surma, and Ottawa's got the lead.
John Zion for Ottawa. Up to Sozanov. His pass to Talbot. One man to beat. Talbot scores! Far side, low on Rob Zepp. Power play goal for the Ottawa 67s.
He is on fire tonight for the 67s. Look at the jump in his legs. Right here, he explodes with the puck. Head up, shot, a goal scorer's goal from the captain, Mighty Joe. And the 67s now have a stranglehold on the Plymouth Whalers. 2-0. Nothing Zepp could do on that play. He just placed it perfectly.
It had nowhere else to go.
Just a beautiful goal scorer's goal from the captain.
Tied up by two Whalers. Savage came in there, and here comes Plymouth. 3-on-2. Bernarski with Jarrett and Stewart. Centered in front. Scores! Preston Mitzi left alone in front, and Plymouth climbs to within one. Picked off by Jarrett, centered in front. Ottawa taking
Kilray, Zen and Konopka handing him the cup.
Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Back with Ontario politics this week with our good friends Lindsay Maskell and Andrew Brander. So, Andrew, you were working on behalf of volunteering on behalf of a friend of yours in the election. Did your candidate win?
It was a Brampton seat, so yes.
It was a Brampton seat. Okay.
Yeah, it was Brampton North. Graham McGregor, a brand new PC member of provincial parliament, headed to Queen's Park.
Okay,
so
good for
very,
him. Good
very
for him.
excited for him.
I've heard great things from you. Lindsay, not the result you were hoping for, I guess, right? Obviously, with the way things turned out.
But still, again, I was a volunteer as well. My paid campaigning time was in the three McGuinty general elections. But, at the same time, I'm incredibly proud of my friends that stepped forward to volunteer and work on a campaign and keep the important stuff that we're still all really proud of our time in government and what we did in keeping that alive.
Okay, let's talk leadership. By the way, we've just confirmed one of our guests later this morning will be Steve Blais, who was a former city councillor here in Ottawa, was reelected in Ottawa Orleans, and there's a quote from him in QP briefing this morning that he didn't come here to sit in the back row for 2 to 6 years, so he's mulling a run for the leadership of the Ontario Liberal Party. If I was advising the Liberals, like they would ever listen to me, honest to goodness, I would look outside and try to get someone with no connection to the previous Liberal government at all, but because I think that's a stinking albatross around the neck of the leader. But that's difficult. Because there's not much to choose from. And you need somebody in the House, no doubt, for 4 years. So what do you look for in a leader, Lindsay?
Well, I don't disagree with you, Rob. I do think we need to look for somebody who didn't sit in a cabinet in the last government. I think that's a fair point. Mm-hmm. I think the last time, people made this, they were so shocked by the result and thought, well, we need to organize, and organizers went, I was on Team Neutral and helped organize the convention, as you remember.
Yeah, right before we went into COVID lockdown and everything. It was one of the last big events was the Liberal Party convention, right? So, yeah.
So I didn't put my hand up to help with organizing for any of the leaders, and I had people that I would have, right? So Stephen is a dear friend of mine, and I ran his local campaign, but I also, just at that juncture, didn't, sort of thought we need to go outside. We need somebody. I'm an organizer myself, so I don't always think those are the people whose names should be on the ballot personally. So going outside, somebody who hadn't been in the cabinet, somebody, I think you bring in great organizers around an inspiring leader who will really resonate with people in all different parts of Ontario. On election night, we're hearing lots of names being, bounced around, some from
Was one of them named Stephen? Steve, that's Steve guy from Orleans. I don't know.
I'm a big fan of Stephen Blais, so he's a wonderful person, and I'm going to be happy for people who put their hand up. But I do think we need to think about, just as a party, who's going to resonate across all of Ontario and have great organizers coalesce around a person who will be, inspiring and motivating and a big contrast.
All right, Andrew, let's you and I advise the New Democrats, because but honest to goodness, we all identified Ottawa Centre as a riding to watch, thought it would be close. It wasn't close. In fact, Joel Harden, I believe I saw, was the only candidate in Ontario to top 30,000 votes or something like that. Like big time landslide victory for Joel Harden, Ottawa Centre. You're looking for leadership material? I would start looking at Ottawa Centre, because that guy is a rising star. That's what I would say. What do you think, Andrew? What do you think?
Yeah, not a bad choice. And I'd say the options actually are probably a little bit more, I know this sounds weird given the seat count, but are actually a little more limited, I believe, for the NDP. Look, the Liberals can pretty safely pick a leader that isn't in the House, given the amount of seats that they have. The NDP actually still has a fair amount of seats and a decent selection of candidates and leadership material to select from. I think, given their status as official opposition, it is that much more important that they don't have a interim leader, that they have whoever's going to be on the ballot in the next election in the House, holding the Premier and his cabinet to account on a daily basis. That was probably the biggest leverage that, Andrea Horwath was able to have over the Liberals, which was, to be able to make that case that I was there and I showed up, even if we all on this panel disagree with that characterization. But regardless, being there and being in the House is important. So Joel Hardin certainly up there, Merritt Stiles. There's a number of others, Jennifer French even. The Tories were probably really looking at winning that Oshawa seat after everything that they had done with working for workers, and they didn't. So the fact that these people have some cachet, they can cash that in. And I think it would be best for them to pick someone who's already there, and for them, unlike the Liberals, to do their leadership very, very quickly.
Okay, Doug Ford needs a cabinet. Let's play the shuffle. Whose star is on the rise? Give me a name. Andrew, give me a name.
So I'd say very quickly, I don't think there's going to be a lot of change in this cabinet. I think 80 to 90% are going to be people who were already there, given the way that, they campaigned on getting it done. It would be a little weird for them to reintroduce a budget that they've already introduced with a bunch of fresh faces. Yeah. But a few things I'm looking for, a new representative from up north, perhaps a new representative from the Windsor area. There are two star candidates from the GTA, Charmaine Williams and Patrice Barnes, both very competent Black female municipal politicians who are great, and of course, who we know the most important thing to the Fords is family. We have Michael Ford as a new MPP in York Southwest, and so those are the people I'm watching.
Okay. Yeah, the big job is health minister. Need a health minister, right? So we'll see what happens there. Any thoughts, cabinet names? Stars on the rise? Stars fading? Lindsay, very quickly.
Well, I do think we will see those that delivered in big important areas for Ford coming in. So the very popular mayor of Timmins, George Peary, to have taken down Gilles Bisson after 32 years, I believe it was. Yeah. Very popular mayor, experienced politician. We saw the premier very much targeting Windsor, so I would expect they would love to have a cabinet minister from the farthest part of southwestern Ontario and an economic hub. I do think we're going to see a couple of senior faces fall from cabinet because, of course, a second and larger mandate means this is the time to make hard decisions, and people don't have the same leverage, right? So right. It's a good time to make those cuts. So I think we're going to see a couple of senior ministers come out of cabinet, and which might end up actually prompting some by-elections pretty early on.
Oh, really? Okay. Like Nepean, for example?
I don't think she should be the happiest with her election night results.
No. Okay. All right. Well, okay. We'll see what happens with that. Okay. Yeah. Gotta go. Hey, thank you, everyone.
Have a great week.
Speak soon. Bye-bye. You too. Andrew Brander with Crestview, Lindsay Maskell, former advisor to Premier McGuinty. Talkback Hour coming up next. We turn the camera around and look at the news media. 44% of people think the news is false. 44% of Canadians tell Abacus State of the News is false. What's going on there? Let's talk about that. 750-1310 after the news. City News.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, June 9th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 14 degrees, and here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. A section of Greenbank remains closed for an investigation this hour after a cyclist was struck this morning. Just after 6:30, police and paramedics were called to Greenbank on the 417 overpass. The 29-year-old cyclist had been struck. Paramedics say they treated the man for multi-system trauma. They performed advanced life support measures on the man. Then he was taken to hospital, listed in critical condition. City News Time, 10:03. Now your forecast. Here's meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Such an unsettled stretch of weather for us. You'll need the umbrella at times today. The high just 18 degrees. More showers tonight near 12. And tomorrow, cloudy showers, even some isolated thunderstorms, a gusty west wind, and the high about 22. For today, the high 18.
And right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's 14 degrees. The American president expected to host Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. It's day 2 of the Summit of the Americas.
President Biden continues his hosting duties at the Summit of the Americas in Los Angeles today, delivering remarks at a meeting of CEOs and the opening session of the summit. He sits down on the sidelines with the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, and later the President of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro. Tonight, the President and First Lady welcome heads of state and government and their spouses for a dinner at the lavish Getty Villa in the Pacific Palisades area of Los Angeles. Karen Travers, ABC News, Washington.
City News Time, 10:04. The Special House Committee investigating last year's January 6 U.S. Capitol insurrection expected to unveil as yet unreleased video, audio, as well as what they term a mountain of evidence. This will happen this evening. Here's reporter Jonathan Carl.
This morning, exclusively on ABC, we're seeing extraordinary, never-before-seen video of the January 6th attack on the Capitol, taken by documentary filmmaker Nick Quested, who turned over hours of footage to the January 6th committee. He was right there with the Proud Boys and others as they marched on the Capitol. He captured the chaos outside, the first barricades going down. Clashes on the inaugural platform, a rioter falling off the balcony.
Now, the committee has also been investigating former U.S. President Donald Trump's unprecedented effort to overturn the 2020 election defeat. Following more than 2 years of pandemic-restricted travel, many Canadians concerned vacation plans could be scrambled. That's due to the backlog in passport processing. Between April 1st of last year and March 31st this year, nearly 1.3 million passports were issued. The federal forecast for the next year is anywhere from 3.6 million to an additional 4.3 million passports. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show.
The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Do you trust the news media? How's that for a question? Do you trust the news media to report the news fairly and accurately? Yes or no? Why not? 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. Pretty straightforward. When you watch the news, when you read the news, when you listen to the news, do you trust what you are seeing, reading, or listening to is the truth? Yes? No? Why? Why not? 750-1310. Trust in the news media. That's the topic for the hour, because I'll tell you what, I read something this morning and it totally bummed me out. It really did. The results of this new survey from the fine people at the public opinion research firm Abacus Data here in Ottawa. According to Abacus, almost half of Canadians, extrapolating, some 15 million people in the country, do not trust the news media. And, you know, since I work in the news media and do a news talk radio show every day, that is thoroughly depressing to think that I come on the air here every day, and it's quite likely that half of the people don't trust a thing I have to say. Hey, thank goodness for you other half. At least the glass is half full. Abacus Data put this statement to the people participating in this poll. Okay, quote, much of the news we receive from news organizations is false, agree or disagree. Much of the news we receive from news organizations is false, agree or disagree, and 44% of those polled said agree. 44%, my goodness. I guess I wasn't expecting a great number, but I was shocked when I read it was 44%. I was taken aback at the lack of trust in the news that it was that high, 44%. And Abacus says, you know, if this number is accurate at all, you'd be talking about 15 million people in the country don't trust the news. They think it's false. And I think that's a problem. I think that's a big problem. If you kind of work in the industry like I do, potentially an existential problem. I see retraining in our future, David. If half the audience thinks we're full of it, that would lead me to think this is not really a growth industry with huge upside.
I'm reflecting now.
But yeah, 44% think, quote, much of the news we receive from news organizations is false. So look, I just want to follow up with this, with your help, maybe dig a little deeper into, why people feel this way, why this level of mistrust is so high. And I just want you to give me a call, help me out. Why is it this way? What is it about the news media that so many think it's false? That the information you're getting in the news media is false. Let's start. Blackburn Hamlet. Brandon, good morning. You're on City News.
Good morning. I enjoy your show every morning.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Brandon, do you trust the news media?
Can you find me 11 million or 11,057 votes? That'll be on tonight hearing, and you'll probably watch it as well on the January 6th.
January 6th, yeah. Yeah, that's tonight at 8 o'clock, yeah. That's in the American news media, yeah.
That I will find truthful because it's a hearing on Trumpism and...
Right.
And that is one of the main things that caused all this media obstruction, I think.
The Trump era, you think, Brandon? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
His constant attacks on the news media?
Yes.
Calling the news media fake news.
Authoritarianism. And,
okay. Yeah, well, that's an interesting angle. It certainly crossed our minds here this morning when we were listening to some old clips of Donald Trump.
Can you give us a question?
Don't be.
Can you give us a question?
I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you stay categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir,
go ahead.
The fake news. It's fake, phony, fake.
Fake, disgusting news.
And they are. They are the enemy of the people.
I'll tell you what, CNN should be ashamed of itself.
Fully against the fake news media or press.
You are a rude, terrible person. You shouldn't be working for CNN.
I want to quote it accurately. The fake news media is not my enemy. It is the enemy of the American people.
It's true, 100%. Because you have an agenda. You're CNN. You're fake news.
Okay. All right. So maybe that's migrating north. I don't know. Maybe there's something to that. Jamie in Ottawa. You're on City News, Jamie.
Hey, how's it going?
It goes. Do you trust the news media to report the news fairly and accurately? Yes or no?
Not necessarily. The reason why I called is because I actually turned on the news today for the first time in probably a couple years. I normally listen to music in my car.
Okay.
And I've just kind of been avoiding it since, I guess since pandemic times have started.
Oh, really?
And,
okay.
I get the point about Donald Trump and his, his campaign against the news that he doesn't agree with, at least. It definitely makes sense as a factor. But I think that the general COVID situation has caused a lot of people to, endure different situations that are very, very stressful. And, a variety of facts might come as inconvenient to them. They might want to, lash out against those things simply by rejecting them. I think we've always had a narrative before the pandemic that the news may be spun in one direction or another. It may be, there may be funding from industry to push a story. I don't think people think the news is presenting incorrect facts, like false facts. I think people don't trust objectiveness and context.
Objectiveness and context. Okay. All right. Okay. The statement that the pollster put to people was, much of the news we receive from news organizations is false. False. Like, strong word. And 44% agreed. 44% agreed. Wow.
I think that's a strong statement and a big number. I assume most of those people don't trust, to some extent, the news. I would be very surprised if 44% of people thought you were saying false facts on the news.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you. That's a really, really nice call. Some interesting observations there. In Nepean. Garth, you're on City News.
Good morning, Rob.
Do you trust the news media?
Here in Canada, I trust the news media outlets that I consume from.
Okay.
Because we have standards, and I think our media here in this country follow them. And but it's how people have changed their consumption of where they get their news media from. Print and newspapers are dying off, and people are going to digital platforms.
Yes.
And the regulation really isn't there to keep the standards of journalism to that high level.
Gotcha.
And my last point, during the power outage last week, I was out for 10 days, and my sources of the news media were limited and in blurbs and blabs. But one thing I really missed was your show. I went 10 days cold turkey with the Rob Snow Show.
Holy cow, you must have had the shakes.
I did.
Very kind of you, Garth. You're back up and running now?
Yes, and again...
Any damage to the property, sir?
No.
No, well, that's good. That's good to hear.
Like I say, I was isolated, And again, I had to find other sources to where I could get updated.
Right.
And again, I did. There is some mistrust in some of the platforms that I see digitally, and I miss the print. I still get both copies of the Sun and the Citizen. And,
you do? Okay. Very loyal.
I trust Canadian journalism because the standards are very high.
Okay. Good. Thank you, Garth. Thank you. Okay, that's encouraging to hear. I'm going to stop, and then I'm going to take Mark's call, and Gerard and Nick. You all hang on the line. We'll be right back. Do you trust the news media? David Coletto, Abacus Data, one of Canada's preeminent pollsters, put this statement to people in a recent survey. Much of what we receive from news organizations is false. And 44% agreed. What's going on there? This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Riding requires attention and focus. No distractions, no moment of unawareness, because one brief moment can cost a lifetime of other moments. Everyone deserves to arrive home.
The Maritime provinces are home to some of the oldest settlements in Canadian history. But did you know that one of the first was actually started by black settlers? Take a minute to learn about the rise and untimely fall of Africville. Black people have lived in Nova Scotia since before the founding of Halifax in 1749, but it wasn't until after the American Revolution in the late 1700s and early 1800s that large groups of black settlers began to arrive in the province, many of whom were former slaves promised freedom and land in Nova Scotia. What they encountered when they arrived, however, was racist treatment by their white neighbors and government officials. This pushed many black people to build homes on the outskirts of town instead. But despite the area receiving little support from government officials and lacking necessities like functioning sewage systems, access to clean water, and proper garbage disposals, the tight-knit community persevered, and so Africville was born. For more than 150 years, the small community grew, expanding from just a few homes to a population of over 400 people. Everything changed, however, in 1964 when plans for a new bridge and the idea of urban renewal prompted the municipality to set its sights on Africville's land. Instead of investing in the community, officials approved a relocation program that promised free job training and employment assistance to help residents through relocation. But the reality wasn't so kind. Residents had their belongings moved in city dump trucks, and homes were demolished immediately after their owners left. Of the 400-plus people living in Africville, only 14 residents held clear legal titles to their land, so the rest were only given $500 with the promise of more social aid in the future. Not much else was actually done to support Africville and its residents until 2001, when a United Nations report called for reparations to be paid to the community. In 2010, Halifax Mayor Peter Kelly apologized for the atrocities against Africville as part of a $4.5 million compensation deal. In 2021, Councillor Lindell Smith put forward a 7-part motion to plan for the future of Africville alongside local organizations and the descendants of former residents. Today, there's a public park and museum where Africville once stood to teach visitors about the history of the land and its community. If you've never heard of Africville, you're not alone. The tragic story of this small black community in Nova Scotia is not as well known as it should be.
Time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Do you trust the news media to report the news fairly and accurately? Yes or no? Why not? I bring this up because of a new poll from Abacus Data. It put a statement to people. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? Much of what we receive from news organizations is false. Do you agree or disagree with that? And 44% said they agreed. They agreed that much of what we receive from news organizations is false. So right back to the phones. Mark, Ottawa South. You're on City News. Mark.
I'd want to know the name of the particular news organization and judge that organization individually.
Okay, but let's be generally speaking, the Canadian news media. Do you trust the Canadian news media? to report stories fairly and accurately?
I can't give you a yes and a no answer because the media is a huge group term which involves thousands, tens of thousands of people, some that are worthy of trust, others that are not.
Okay.
And so how does one answer a question when you're speaking about a group of people that...
Okay. Well, why do you think 44% said they agreed with that statement then?
Because I don't think the question was properly broken down.
Okay.
And see, the question that I judge each media person individually. No one is infallible. The question is, how hard does the media person try, make an effort to get the facts correct and to present them accurately? And again, bias as such isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's a question not of how biased you are, but how dishonest you are. There's nothing wrong with a point of view documentary where you, say, do a program to present a point of view, as long as you're honest in the facts that you present and you don't distort things out of context.
Okay.
And there's so many great journalists who do their very best and are worthy of trust.
Right.
And there's others, like on Fox News, Tucker Carlson is outright lying when he says some of the comments he's made about vaccinations and about the 2020 election being stolen. He knows better.
Okay.
So no, I condemn him. But the term media includes him as well as people that are very righteous, very earnest, dedicated to the truth, and worthy of respect and trust.
So, in Fox News, let's take Fox News, for example. You would condemn somebody like Tucker Carlson, but I know you've said you admired someone like Chris Wallace, who used to work at Fox News. Right? You used to like him, right? When he was at Fox.
He tries to be
He was kind of the
truthful.
straight shooter, right? Yeah, kind of the straight shooter there. Yeah.
He tries to be truthful. He's an honest journalist.
All right. Gotta go. Thank you. I got you. Okay. Media's too big. You can't judge them all, he says. Nick in Richmond. Nick.
Hi, Ron. How's it going?
Hi. It goes, sir. Do you trust the news media to report news fairly and accurately?
I trust them. I do trust news media. I think I answered this poll when it came in my inbox a few months ago. Yeah, okay. I think so. And I did say that I was trusting of the news, but only to a certain degree. And that's just my wife and I actually talked about this weekend when there was a news headline that came up about a dog attack in Calgary, I think, or something.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. The mauling of the elderly woman by 3 dogs. Is that the story?
Right.
Yeah.
And I remember a few years ago, if there was anything with regards to dogs, and if it was, one of the targeted breeds like pit bulls or something like that, that would be the first thing that would be plastered on that headline.
Yeah.
But because it wasn't pit bulls, it wasn't, so it was just 3 dogs, and that's it.
Well, it wasn't reported in the first original report, because I was following that story, and in the first few reports, it didn't say what breed of dog it was. It came out, I saw a report a couple of days ago that said it was pit bull type dogs.
Was it a pit bull? Okay.
Yeah, pit bull type dogs. Yeah. I read that in the Calgary Herald yesterday morning, I believe, Nick.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's just like a little example, right? So if it doesn't fit sometimes some of the, I wouldn't say the narrative, because I don't like really to use that word.
Okay,
but,
well, it's a fair word, I think, yeah.
And so, if it doesn't fit that narrative, then sometimes they'll try and do some workarounds. And I think that's probably why people are a little bit put off sometimes by the news, because if it doesn't fit what their narrative is for that day, month, year, whatever the flavor of the day is, then they sort of do workarounds, and I think that's what's putting a lot of people off on some of the media that we see, especially online. I mean, Facebook being a big media conglomerate now, I think that, it's just easier to manipulate some of the words that people get their hands on or can see every day. So
interesting. Thank you, Nick, for calling.
All right. Thank you, Rob.
You too. Yep. Up next in South Keys, Gerard. Is it Gerard?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Do you trust the news media to report news fairly and accurately?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Okay. All right.
I'm retired from the combat arms in the Canadian military, and after 30 years, troops know when they're being when they're being fed a bunch of crap. And Canadians are just so lost. Canadians don't even know that they're Canadian anymore. When you have CTV and CNN are affiliated, and if you even just observe the last couple weeks with our wonderful Trudeau there, who uses American politics in Canada to get support, it's just obnoxious. And look what Freeland said a couple of years ago. She basically said, well, if you can't tell them the truth, figure out how to lie to them. And
I don't remember her saying something like that.
Well, it was to that where
I mean, Catherine McKenna was kind of caught on a video saying if you repeat a lie often enough, people will believe it or something like that.
I believe Freeland's in there too. But anyways, I apologize for the error. But I still feel the same about our wonderful government. Look at the status of Canada right now. We don't even live in a democracy anymore. Yesterday,
what do you mean?
Our Trudeau.
What do you mean? We just had an election in Ontario a week ago today. What are you talking about?
Provincially, but federally.
Yeah, provincially.
Sir, are we having a federal election?
We just had a federal election.
No, sir.
6 months ago.
Listen, Sellout Singh made an agreement with Trudeau,
right?
And we basically live in a socialist dictatorship now.
No, we don't live in a socialist.
Well, then we're being
these sorts of look. I'm not here to defend. I'm not here to defend Mr. Trudeau. I'm not here to defend Mr. Trudeau.
Well, I'm just saying with the media, if you pay attention, like I can.
Of course, I pay attention, sir. I've worked in it for 22 years.
Yes,
of course,
sir,
I pay attention.
Doing a
I did.
Job. That's the reason why I listen to the radio now. You can't listen. You can't.
Yeah.
The national news is so liberal orientated.
Okay. So for you, because this is interesting, because I want to get at this. It's the political news that you don't trust.
Exactly.
Right.
But
there's all kinds of news.
But they also manipulate. They manipulate it in the favor of the woke movement. And that's the way the Western world is going. We're being manipulated and controlled by a.
But you figured it all out, though. Joe.
I haven't figured it out. I'm just.
Well, you're not being manipulated, right? You're not being manipulated. You're warning everybody else that they're being manipulated.
I'm not warning anybody. I live in my own little world. You ask people to call in to.
I know.
And I'm responding to what you asked.
Yep.
And I'm just.
And I'm glad we had a healthy debate about it, Gerard. Hope you'll call back again sometime. I mean that. Dave in the West End.
Well, Rob.
Yeah, Dave, I triggered you with playing a Trump clip, right?
Oh, boy. Here's the thing. I think we're confusing opinion and news.
Right, okay.
And the two are so meshed today that you're kind of defending the news media, and you don't have to. Because when we get the 12 o'clock news and the 1 o'clock, all that sort of thing, news is fabulous. Like the job CKOI did during the pandemic and during this last storm was wonderful.
Thank you.
But the point is that the CNN and Fox, I mean, that's like black and white.
Yeah.
And there's no in between. And it's strictly opinion. And all these people, like CNN, for a year, went on with this hoax about Russia. They never apologized. They've never corrected it. And like I think you said something.
So you think the cable news in the United States is just too partisan, right?
Well, for sure.
Yeah,
it's not news.
It's not even news. Yeah.
It's totally opinion.
Opinion, entertainment, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And it's the news we get. Like the actual news is good news. I remember as a kid during the war, we had these newsreels.
Sure.
And people that give us, but the opinions, I don't mind discussing with people their opinion, but when they get down to ridiculous statements about so and so and so and so, they lose.
But in Canada, do you trust the news media?
Well, I don't know what the news. Yes, I trust the 1 o'clock news, the 12 o'clock news when they're telling me about this storm, but I do not trust the opinion.
Like for example, do you? Let me ask you just a quick question before the before the news here?
Go ahead.
Like, do you watch the supper hour news on TV, the local news?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And you trust what they say on there,
yes,
right? And do you still read the newspaper, Dave?
No.
You don't read the newspaper?
I don't. You know what? My neighbor gives me the death columns.
The obituaries.
The obituary.
Okay.
Exactly.
So you can plan your day. I see.
I have breakfast with about 25 Italians from Preston Street.
Yeah.
And as I say, some of them are deaf, the other half are senile.
Okay. All right, Dave. We'll talk soon, buddy. Bye-bye. Yeah, back after the news on City News.
The Calgary Stampede is a world-renowned festival celebrating wrangling, bull riding, and everything cowboy. But did you know that many people credit its origins to a Black Canadian? Take a minute to meet John Ware. The word cowboy has racist roots. Before the American Civil War, white ranchers were called cowhands, but the enslaved black men and women working alongside them were actually referred to as cowboys to infantilize and disrespect black ranchers. The legend of cowboy John Ware is full of impressive feats and awe-inspiring skill, including the ability to train even the wildest broncos and easily hold a horse on its back. But the real story of John Ware is one that starts from more humble beginnings. Ware was born into slavery in the United States, gaining his freedom towards the end of the American Civil War in 1865. Ware's skills with cattle ranching developed as he traveled throughout the United States, eventually settling in a town southwest of present-day Calgary, Alberta, which made him one of the first black pioneers in the prairies. Over time, news of Ware and his amazing cowboy skills began to spread, and people came from across North America to witness his horsemanship and skills as a rancher. Eventually, Ware went on to own many of his own ranches. In 1892, he became the first man in Western Canada to earn the title of steer wrestler, and Ware's feats in local contests set the stage for the Calgary Stampede Rodeo we know today. In September of 1905, Ware was killed in a freak accident with his horse, and more than 10,000 mourners from across the region attended his funeral, making it one of the largest in Alberta history. Though his true story is difficult to separate from the legends around him, Ware's status as a respected forefather of cowboy skill continues to be celebrated today. Ware has dedicated monuments across Alberta, including several sites near his first ranch, a Calgary school in his namesake, and a building at the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology.
For local news in Ottawa and the Valley, this is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, June 9th. Good morning, I am Damilola Unime. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it is 14 degrees, and here's what's making news right now. Most remaining mandatory mask rules in Ontario will expire on Saturday. Masks will not be required on public transit and many healthcare settings starting at 12 a.m. The province's chief medical officer, Dr. Kieran Moore, says the decision was based on high vaccination rates and improvements in COVID-19 situation. Masks will still be required in long-term care homes and retirement homes. Ottawa City Council has given the chief building official the authority to suspend fees for demolition, building permits, replacement of civic number plates, and accessing historic building records in the wake of last month's deadly storm. There is also a plan for city staff to prepare a report on rules for installing generators in multi-residential buildings with elevators, as well as in gas stations across the city. And we hear from the Bank of Canada this morning what it sees as the key vulnerabilities and risks to Canada's financial system. The central bank's annual financial system review comes as decades-high inflation rates are straining deeply indebted households following a significant run-up in real estate market. Inflation has intensified far deeper than the bank expected at this time last year, hitting 6.8% in April. And that's due in part to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. City News Time is 10:33. I am Damilola Unime. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show.
The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Do you trust the news media is a question I'm putting to you in this hour. Do you trust the news media to report the news fairly and accurately? Yes or no? I bring this up because of a news story today. Abacus Data put a statement to people in a recent poll. The statement was, much of what we receive from news organizations is false. Do you agree or disagree? Much of what we receive from news organizations is false, and 44% said they agree. Much of what we receive from news organizations is false. And that thoroughly depressed me, and I looked up other career opportunities, and then I thought, well, I'll go to work today. David's counting on me showing up today. Tomorrow, not a sure thing. But just let me break these numbers down, because this lack of faith in the news media is actually fairly widespread. Sample size, 1,500 Canadians, poll done May 20th, 24th, so just a few weeks ago, margin of error, 2.5%, 44% think most of what we're getting from the news media is false. Like, a strong word, just downright false. 56% disagreed. So while it is a majority that are inclined to believe the news stories from the news media, it's not really an encouraging number. And then the Abacus poll breaks it down by party support or party identity, affiliation, whatever you want to call it. So people who support the People's Party, Maxime Bernier's People's Party, PPC, basically have no faith in the news media. It's like 89%. 9 out of 10 think the news media is lying to them all the time. People who say they support the Conservative Party, that number is 59%. So, again, a solid majority, almost 6 out of 10. Say, much of what we get in the news media is false. Green Party, more than half think the news is false. Green Party supporters, 52%. NDP, almost 40% for the NDP. 39%. As for the Liberal supporters, 32%. Liberal supporters are, most trusting of the news media, I guess, but it's not a great number when a third say, I don't believe what's in the news. I think much of the information we get from the news media is false. And that's like the upside. Then Abacus asked about candidates in the race for the Conservative Party leadership. And those who think Pierre Poilievre is the Conservative leadership candidate who best reflects their views, 55% said they don't trust media information. Now, remember what Pierre Poilievre has said about the media and how he approaches the media. He doesn't. He doesn't talk to the media. He uses social media.
I'm undefeated in 7 consecutive elections in a big Ontario multicultural city. That's because I don't try to go through the liberal media to get my message out. I go around them. I deliver my message to millions of people through social media that we're seeing in the tens of thousands who've been coming out to my rallies, people who have never voted Conservative before in their lives.
I don't go through the mainstream, well, he called it the liberal mainstream media, right? I go to social media. And according to this poll, more than half don't trust the media information if they say, Pierre's my guy. Okay? Not the same with Jean Charest supporters, 27%. People with a high school education, 50-50. Residents of Alberta have the deepest mistrust of what they get in the news media, coming in at 53%. And you throw it all together and punch it all in, the supercomputer gives you a number back, and it's 44%. I think the news media, the information they report is false. So what's going on there? What is going on there? My goodness gracious. False. Luke in Ottawa South, you're on City News. Luke.
Good morning.
Morning. Do you trust the news media?
Yes, mostly, yes,
Mostly,
I do. I
okay.
think it's slanted and biased, of course, but that seems like a number's awfully high. I'm curious, what does much mean as opposed to, say, some or most?
It means much.
Okay. Can you put a number, a percentage
It just
on
says,
that?
I'm just going by the statement that was released by Abacus Data. So I would have to, we were hoping to get David on today. It just says much of what we receive from news organizations is false. Agree or disagree? And 44% overall agreed.
I think that might be true if you add the word social into before media. Then that sounds okay. But,
Can you repeat that, Luke? You just dropped out there for just a second. Just repeat what you said.
I think that might be more accurate if you put the word social before media.
Okay.
But to me, it seems super high. Certainly slanted, underreporting, biased, etc. Like
right.
Over the weekend, the media was biased towards the royal family.
Okay. Well, I wonder if political news maybe skews the numbers, because there's all kinds of news, right? Local news. We report on what happened at the school board. We report that the vote passed on Lansdowne yesterday at City Hall. We go to court and report on a court case. We go to a car accident, whatever. How can the information be false? Business news and reporting on stocks or sports scores. How can that be false? So I wonder if it's political news that people are so deeply
it seems like way too high of a number.
Way too high. Okay. All right. Okay. That's interesting. Thank you, Luke, for waiting there. I appreciate that. Let's go to Bill in Orleans. Bill, you're on City News. Hi, Bill. Do you trust the news media?
No, not really. And I think you make a good point. Do I trust them to tell me about the storms that happen? Yes, I do trust them when I watch my local news. I trust the factually based stories, I do. But when you get into the political realm, well, then it really does change, and it changes drastically. They are very slanted to the left.
Okay.
You're saying, do I trust them? Well, I'll give you a list of a few stories that they aren't dishonest. They're outright lies. And a lot of it's American-based, but it's the same thing here. We get the same news. I turn on CTV for the political news. It's like watching CNN.
Really? Okay.
The Rittenhouse story, the Russiagate story, the Covington High School kids story, the hands up, don't shoot. These are all blatant lies that were
had colluded with the Russians.
Yeah, that was kind of a big story because
that was a huge story. Yeah.
And now we're finding out that the FBI and Hillary Clinton's people orchestrated the whole thing. There's no one coming on apologizing for it. The Covington High School boy, he sued CNN for multi-million dollar suit for lying about him. They showed the video. There's a real rush to.
That was the young. That was the young guy who was. He was accused of mocking First Nations guy or something.
The Aboriginal man.
Aboriginal guy, yeah.
Right. That was false. He sued CNN for millions of dollars. Kyle Rittenhouse was found guilty by the mainstream media before the trial even happened, and still considered guilty after he was found innocent.
Yeah.
These are serious stories and serious implications for the mainstream media.
Yeah.
Now, many on your channel mock Fox. Well, they actually were right about all of these stories, and they didn't rush to judgment like the. And the other part of it, Rob, is.
Well, you wouldn't say like Tucker Carlson isn't in the news business, is he? Really?
Well, he's dealing with news.
Or is he more of a?
It's opinion. It is opinion.
It's opinion. It's entertainment. It's whatever.
I don't know about entertainment. Well, it is often entertaining, but it is opinion.
Oh, I think it's just a different brand of entertainment.
Something else, but they're dealing with the main stories.
Yeah.
And if a story is in the news and he's giving opinion based on the factual as opposed to the made-up facts by the other side, then I guess it isn't opinion. It is.
Okay. Well, let's stick to Canada here. It's a Canadian survey about the Canadian news media.
Okay. Well. Okay. I found there were a lot of lies.
Like Canadian TV news, Canadian newspapers, Canadian radio news, whatever the case is. Do you trust it? That they're going to report the stories fairly and accurately? You don't?
No, I see the mirror. I see the mirror the same.
Okay.
I see the mirror. Look, Rob, and the mistakes are always made one way. They never make a mistake or tell a lie that favors the right. Anytime there's a lie or the other thing is too, it's not just the outright lies, it's the lies of omission. Hunter, I know you want to get into the Canadian, I agree, but I find Canadian news, it's the same major stories that are happening in the States come up here, and they're told the same way that CNN tells them on all the channels. And these are serious issues. You've got Hunter Biden with his laptop. That was a story that was censored by the media. And that was right before an election. Do you think they'd have censored it if it was Trump's son? Of course they wouldn't have.
Okay. All right.
Hunter Biden.
They play favorites. You're saying they play favorites.
Blatantly.
All right. You don't have to yell at me. You don't yell at me. Don't yell at me.
No, blatantly and obviously.
All right. Okay. I got you, Bill. Loud and clear, man. Holy cow. I'm just getting too old to be yelled at, okay? Like, you're not my mother. Sean in Brockville. Sean.
Hey, how are you today?
I'm good, Sean.
So I'm not going to answer your question direct because I think the poll itself is fundamentally wrong.
Fundamentally wrong. How so?
Because there's no choice.
No choice.
Is it fake or is it not fake? Is it false? Is it not false?
Okay.
I think if you drilled down into the 44% that is upsetting you this morning.
No, I'm not upset. I just want to,
I meant that with a ha-ha.
Okay, okay.
Or the 56% that are okay with it. I think what you would find is that, no, it's not false, but it's manipulated.
And what do you mean manipulated? What do you mean manipulated?
I think the stories are told the way that the outlets decide they're going to tell the stories.
Okay. Give me an example.
And I'm not
Mr. Trudeau's in Los Angeles right now at the Summit of the Americas, for example.
I mean, he's being played as a bit of a buffoon at this point in time, going down there.
Okay.
It almost seems like it's a bit of a joke, with all the things that are going on in Canada right now, inflation, prices, gas prices, grocery prices, and none of these things are being addressed. But
his announcement today is about climate change.
A very important thing to talk about as well, especially coming out of the storms of Victoria Day weekend.
Okay.
So, there's a manipulation that's taking place.
Okay. All right.
I mean, I don't think it's an issue of just being false or not false. I think there's got to be. I think that's why I say the poll is wrong, because it's not giving people the opportunity to explain their answer. Okay. And I understand in a yes/no poll, it's hard to give, because people will write, pages upon pages. But at the same time, I think the poll was set up incorrectly.
Right. Okay. Because it's just kind of a yes, I agree, or no, I disagree with that statement. Yeah.
Yeah, but
there's no room for nuance there, right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't agree, for example, that the news is false. But I would say that in some cases, at least, the news is presented in such a way that it is biased to a certain extent to whatever the subject matter happens to be.
Good enough. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, sir. Yep, bye-bye. Okay, 1047. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Well, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, we've been in the city for over 50 years, supporting youth between the ages of 6 and 24 and providing these amazing relationships, these amazing mentoring relationships to them. And, what I've seen, I've been with the organization 10 years, and in my 10 years, I've seen some transformational life-changing relationships that, youth that have been meeting with their mentors from the age of 6, who go on to be meeting with them until they're 18 plus, who are now, some of them are graduating from university, some are going to their mentors' weddings, being part of the family and being there when they have additional siblings, etc. So it's just an amazing thing to watch, that it's life-changing and life-lasting.
Yeah, and you're always looking for new initiatives. I think most organizations are, and even pre-pandemic, always looking at something new and interesting, ways to raise funds, raise awareness. And you have a new one called Thrive. Tell us about it.
Right. So Thrive actually started as our Clothes for Kids' Sake program. In 2016, we were trying to find new ways to raise dollars to support our mentoring programs. And we started off with some clothing bins in 2016, and then partnered with the Ottawa Catholic School Board, in which they allowed us to put new bins across the city. And so we've been collecting clothes since 2016, and we're just over the £1 million mark of how many clothes we've actually collected.
Wow.
And amazing. An amazing partnership with the Catholic School Board. And that was phase 1. And we collect gently used clothing. We don't collect anything else.
Right.
In phase 2, we really wanted to collect, we wanted to move into potentially a retail location. And in 2020, obviously things didn't happen. COVID occurred. Mm-hmm. So we weren't able to open up a store, but we opened up a thrift store. And Thrive Thrift Select is where you can go and buy gently used clothing online. And we have items for young people, items for adults, items for infants, and we ship Canada Post, or you can come and pick it up at our location right now at Confederation High School in Ottawa, which is where our offices are. But really the goal is we're doing two things, right? We are providing support to our youth in Ottawa, because the dollars we raise come right back into our programs, to our mentoring programs. And the second piece is we're helping the environment. Keeping 1 million pounds of clothes out of landfills has been really significant. And also being able to bring these dollars back in to be able to create our mentoring programs and provide these opportunities for our youth.
On the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Do you trust the news media to report the news fairly and accurately? Yes, no, why not? Abacus Data put a statement to the people in one of its most recent polls, and the statement was, much of what we receive from news organizations is false. Do you agree or disagree? And 44% said they agreed. 44% said they agreed. So what could explain this? What's going on here? I mean, I have some thoughts, but I'm totally biased. I'm conflicted because I'm in the news. I think the news media is doing the best it can with what it has against some very strong headwinds. There are things that don't help. I mean, for example, it doesn't help when the Prime Minister takes to the microphone and says things like this.
The allegations in the Globe story this morning are false.
That's one of my all-time favorite Trudeau clips. Can you play that one again, please?
The allegations in the Globe story this morning are false.
Don't you love that? There's the leader of the country, most powerful man in the country, says the Globe and Mail, Bob Fife, Steve Chase, basically calls them fake news, okay, for reporting on what turned out to be a huge scandal, the SNC-Lavalin scandal, that cost Mr. Trudeau, his most trusted advisor, Gerald Butts, and once highly touted female Indigenous cabinet minister Jody Wilson-Raybould, and the clerk of the Privy Council took early retirement. That's a big price to pay for fake news.
Story this morning are false.
Okay, let's go to Michelle, Ottawa South. Michelle.
Well, first of all, that's why we all love you, Rob. It's because if this was a CBC talk show and that had been the topic, we would have never just heard the clip you played.
Okay.
And so,
all right. Do you trust the news media? Do you trust the news media?
I can't answer yes or no just fairly, but I will tell you that I spent this morning running around here trying to find an old copy of a book I had by Craig Oliver. It was called Oliver Twist. And just because I wanted to get my facts right, so I'm just going to go by my memory here. He reported that he had asked him that because he became such good friends with Pierre Trudeau, they were chumming and everything, he felt he could no longer report on him without a bias, and he reported something that could have really got him, it wasn't, what's the word I'm looking for? Appropriate, I guess. Okay. And he has to be removed to Washington. And so I've seen the standard of our media decline in my lifetime, where the news, and perhaps it's what Steve Madeley had said many years ago, that it's 24 hours and they've just got to find something to talk about, and it's no longer the same show. The news is not the news that we knew. And so, I mean, and how often do we see Trudeau never held accountable for what he's done? If Mr. Harper had wore blackface, we wouldn't even know Harper's name.
Yeah. And I don't want to go back and relitigate all these old issues.
No, neither do I. But I see this happening again, and we, call it nepotism or fate or something. We've got the same guy Trudeau, and we've got the daughter of Oliver, and it's the same show again. And sometimes I feel like I'm watching a cheerleader. And CBC has a pattern where, before an election, when the writs dropped or something, they tell us how great the Conservative or whoever the strongest opposition is doing and what's happening. And the reporting seems fair. They toss in a couple of negative things about the other guy. But as we approach the big ballot day, the reporting style is so biased and it's so evident, and that has to change if they want to bring up their reputation again. During trucker loot, as one of your callers referred to it, there was a competition with our local anchors here and another channel about who was down at ground zero first, like as if they were on the front line of a battlefield, risking their lives to be out there to bring us this horrific story. Like, it's such crap and self-promotion and, I'm better than you. Listen, morons, there's regular people walking around down
you
there.
think standards have declined. Is that what you're saying?
Extremely, Rob.
Okay, all right. I'm going to end it there because the phone lines are jammed, Michelle. Thanks for the call. Let's take this one. Bill in Ottawa. Bill.
Good morning, Rob.
You trust the news media?
Not exactly, no. I think that too often the people in the media go along with the agenda of the popular tide at the time.
Okay.
And they don't report the whole facts, all the facts that are pertinent to an issue.
Okay.
They're very selective about how they do things.
Okay.
And you get a good example in our own history. You look at the '63 election, the vilification of Diefenbaker. That was really media-driven, and much of what they said about him was false. But you don't hear any correction of that or any revision of that.
Okay.
It tends to get repeated again and again. Or you look at the example in the U.S. right now. Chuck Schumer and Biden are both using the language they criticized Trump for using in 2006, and they're using it right now against the Supreme Court of their own country. You don't see any pushback on that or any criticism of them for doing that.
So again, you think narratives are at work, agendas, whatever the case might be.
Well, they do what's easiest for them, I guess.
What is
and
easy?
sometimes worse than that. But
all right.
But I don't think there's a conspiracy to completely overthrow the public. I think they do mislead us, and they often misreport. By not including all the facts.
Don't report all the facts. Okay, thank you, Bill. Thank you. Let's take this one in Embrun. Nancy. Hi, Nancy. You're on the air, Nancy. Do you trust the news media to report the news fairly and accurately?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Okay.
Okay, I'll tell you why.
All right.
I'm not very worldly. I don't know whole lot of stuff, but what I do know, and I know it for a fact. And then I hear it on the radio or on the TV, and it's totally lies.
Lies.
Then you don't believe anything. I'll just give you an example quick. Whenever the truckers were in town, and they were saying about, in Embrun, there's this big pile of trucks and all this different stuff. And there was a big thing going on there that supported the truckers. And then, those extra police had to come in and rough them. They couldn't let them go. We had to keep paying more for them because they're congregating down in Embrun. Well, they weren't. And then the next day said the same thing. So I took a look. They're not. Less of that. There was basically some tents and some porta potties that were rentals that were still there. Then the next day, they're still congregating. We can't let all these extra police go. And I took a look. Empty, just a field, a farmer's field. That was
right.
All lies over and over and over again.
Okay.
And so that's just something I personally know. Because a lot of this stuff, I don't know if it's true or not. I have no idea. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but something you do know, total lies. And then I talked to another fellow that was from Vars, and I had told him my little story, and he said, he said Vars is an even bigger joke. There's two trucks that were parked there. They were there before the event. They were there after the event. And they were talking about some parking in Vars. Never happened.
Yeah.
And
they were in Van Cleek Hill, though. Wasn't there
I heard they were in Van Cleek Hill. And
Herbs, right? At Herbs in Van Cleek Hill. Weren't they there?
I heard they were. I did not drive to Van Cleek Hill because...
Okay. All right. Okay. Right. I got you. Lies. You say they lie. The media lies. Wow. That's very strong. Nancy, very strong. Okay, all right. We got to stop. Sorry, Stephen and Kempville. If you want to call me back tomorrow, it's the Friday Free For All. It's wide open on topics tomorrow between 10 and 11, but we have to end it here because the news, just the news, coming up. This is City News.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, June 9th. Good morning. I am Damilola Unime. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it is 14 degrees. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. With COVID-19 indicators continuing to improve, the province saw its lowest positivity rate yesterday in 6 months. And now Ontario is set to lift most remaining masking rules this weekend. City News reporter Kevin Meisner has the story.
Some of the people pulling up their masks and say they can't wait to toss that face covering starting Saturday. But Joshua, who rides the subway daily, is not among them.
I'm still planning to wear my mask on transits and, close quarter public spaces. But out in the open, I'll probably feel safe to take it off.
Mike also plans to keep a mask handy.
If it's really crowded, I'll do it just for my own peace of mind.
Others are happy to hear many hospitals plan to continue with their own individual mask policies for visitors beyond Saturday.
You see people all the time with ill children and sick family members wearing masks, and they're not going to stop wearing the mask.
After Friday, the only remaining mask mandate in Ontario will be for long-term care and retirement homes. And Kevin Meisner, City News.
And on the COVID-19 front, there are 907 new cases of COVID-19 in the province, and that's down from 1,013 yesterday. 57 of the cases are in Ottawa. There are 549 people in hospital, with 118 in the ICU, and there are 10 deaths. With the weather forecast, here's City News meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Such an unsettled stretch of weather for us. You'll need the umbrella at times today. The high just 18 degrees. More showers tonight near 12. And tomorrow, cloudy showers, even some isolated thunderstorms, a gusty west wind, and the high about 22. For today, the high 18.
City News time is 11:03. The Federal Conservative Party says it will have a record number of people voting in its leadership race, with more than 600,000 members eligible to vote. However, the party warns that number could change as it goes through the verification process of the membership list. The party says it will be able to scale up operations to handle the major increase in members, with ballots being mailed out in late July or early August. They have to be sent back to the party by September 6th. The new leader will be announced on September 10th at an event in Ottawa. 6 candidates are running for the top job. MPs Pierre Poilievre, Scott Aitchison, and Leslie Lewis, former Quebec Premier Jean Charest, Brampton Mayor Patrick Brown, and former MPP Roman Barber. I am Damilola Unime. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
So there's lots of buzz right now about electric cars because of the price of gas. Okay, that's natural. People are looking for money-saving alternatives. And if they find something in their budget, maybe that means an electric car. And as I said earlier this morning, you know, the auto industry is moving that way in a big, big way. And some automakers, Volvo, Ford, have said in a decade, maybe a little longer, we're not even going to sell cars with internal combustion engines. We have governments that are moving to phase out the sale of vehicles with internal combustion engines. But I heard an interview yesterday with an expert in innovation in the auto sector who said the next big thing is not necessarily going to be electric cars. The cars will be electric, but they will be also fully autonomous. Now, here in Ottawa, we're really on the cutting edge of this. We're in a pretty good place, I think, with Area XO. This is one of the centers of research for CAVs, connected autonomous vehicles. And joining us right now, we have Kelly Days, Strategic Market Director of Ottawa's Area XO, calling in from Detroit today. Hi there.
Hi, Rob. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. What a great introduction. So excited to talk to you.
You're at the Auto Tech Detroit conference.
I am.
Wow, that must be exciting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was just talking to your producer, and, one of the things that's so evident here, of course, Detroit's roots in auto go so far back. And so seeing those traditional automakers with their next generation of cars on the floor, and then really seeing, all the other companies that are going to support connected autonomous vehicles all in one place. I was here in 2019, the last time I was here, and even since then, the ratio of those companies has changed so substantially.
Okay. So I heard an interview on the radio yesterday with a person by the name of Kathy Wood, who runs an ETF called ARK Investment. She says her whole philosophy is I invest in innovation. And she said companies like Tesla, companies like Google, which has a company called Waymo, there's another company in California called Cruise, they are really spending big bucks to make this a reality, and that these types of cars that seem like science fiction, they could really proliferate by the year 2030. 2030 is only 7.5 years from now. How realistic is a time frame like that, do you think, Kelly?
I actually think so. Every day, I think it's more and more realistic. So I'm lucky enough to work at Area XO, which is operated by Invest Ottawa. So we actually have an 1,866-acre fenced and gated test facility right here in Ottawa, and we are focused on that next generation of autonomy and connected vehicle. And Rob, you and I have been doing this for a long time in Ottawa. We know our historical roots around telecom and communication, and that's really at the core of this next generation of vehicle. A lot of the companies you mentioned, Waymo, Tesla, Cruise, they're really focused right now, for the most part, on being able to drive as good as people in autonomous mode, right? So using cameras and some sensors, not a whole lot, but being able to operate with any sort of assistance, right? Which is great. I get that, but I think the real promise of connected autonomous vehicle technology is when we take it to the next level. And given the given our roots in telecom and communication, our deep history as a leader in that space, I really think we are so poised to lead that next wave of CAVs when they're ready to talk to infrastructure, to drive better and more imaginable places than people could ever do. Receiving information from city infrastructure, and then being able to act on huge amounts of data, talk to each other, right? That's when we're really going to see, I believe, the promise of these vehicles being safer, secure, sustainable in city environments.
Okay. We're going to listen to a clip. This is Elon Musk. Now, it's from 5 years ago. He was at a governor's conference in the United States, and he predicted that in 20 years, so that would really be 15 years from now, most of the vehicles will be electric and they'll be fully autonomous. So 15 years from now, by the year 2037. Let's play that clip here.
But if you were to say go out 20 years, overwhelmingly, things are electric, autonomous, overwhelmingly.
Fully autonomous?
Fully autonomous.
So no one will have to touch the steering wheel if there is one?
There will not be a steering wheel. In 20 years, it will be like having a horse. People have horses, which is cool. But
so having a regular car will be like having a horse. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. And there will be people that have, non-autonomous cars, like people have horses. It just would be unusual to use that as a mode of transport.
Yes. Right. So that's really interesting. So that's how he envisions it. We'll see what happens with that time frame, 2037. But when I think about the traditional auto sector, it's not so much just the fully assembled vehicle, but it's the ecosystem that goes into making that vehicle. It's the parts, it's the technology. So in the case of a CAV, connected autonomous vehicle, what's our strength here in Ottawa when it comes to that ecosystem?
Yeah, so at Area X.0, we run a communication infrastructure that supports that connected, so the C part of the CAVs, right? So we were partnered with Ericsson, Nokia. We provide a network, a communication infrastructure with the end devices, the machine vision sensors, to be able to support that next generation of CAVs. And it's, our strength in communication and telecom has a huge history. The other really critical thing, Rob, that I'm really excited about is being the capital city, we've got the regulators and policymakers. We also have such a strong partnership with City of Ottawa. We've developed a process where companies can, test their sensors, their products, their software, first at the private test track, and then actually deploy in real-world infrastructure with the City of Ottawa. The caliber of engineering talent in our city is just unbelievable, and their willingness to embrace innovation. So with the regulators, the policymakers, our partnership with City, the industry players in machine vision, sensors, communication, RF signals, testing of that with companies like ThinkRF, the security layer, right, which, isn't even being talked about, but when the CAVs can actually communicate with infrastructure in the city setting, right, so cities are, the most dangerous place for these vehicles to operate because there's a lot of people, there's smaller roads, there's more cars in the roads, and the work we're doing is very much focused on creating safety and security and in CAVs in the city setting. So being able to do that work in our private test tracks and deploy into the public area is a model that we've really exemplified at Area X.0, and I think it's going to be a model that others will be looking at. So our deep history in telecom is really at the roots of all of this, and communication between everything like drones. It's not just vehicles, right? It's smart city drones, Rob. They're going to be flying around bringing you pizza, or
smart city drones are going to bring me pizza. I love it. Okay,
pizza. Right. Move people, but they're often flying in cellular systems. The next generation of drones are using communication infrastructure that we are such experts at, and all of these things working together, talking together, the vehicles talking to each other so they know the right speed. In the future, we haven't even talked about what does a city design and planning look like.
Yeah.
Maybe there's no more traffic lights, no more parking lots, but to really, bring the promise of those vehicles, that's what we're working on, and it's absolutely a strength of our region.
Well, I know some involved in this industry think it's a potential business model would be like a subscription-based hail a ride service. Like we already have Uber now, and I hail the ride. But imagine that is the way that you get around Ottawa. Hey, Siri, come and get me. I need to go to school. Hey, Siri, come and get me. I'm going to work now. Whatever the case might be. And I subscribe to that kind of service. And it's the autonomous electric zero-emission vehicle comes and gets me, takes me where I need to go, whatever the case might be. Realistic? That's realistic, right?
I think so. I really do, especially in cities. Rob, will that fly? I mean, Canada's a very big country.
Yeah.
will that fly in other areas? I'm not sure. Maybe that'll be a phased approach, but I think we will see that in cities sooner than later. The last time I was in San Francisco, their downtown area, they actually are starting to implement drop-off and pickup lanes, right? So that the cars pull over and drop off and pick up. They're also, many cities around the world are implementing, no cars in the downtown core. So I think in cities, yes, I do believe that will be a model that will make a lot of sense.
Yeah, there was a story that went viral not that long ago. Cruise, as I mentioned, is one of the companies that's involved in this. We have a friend of our family works for that company in California. And there was a problem with one of the vehicles, and it was stopped, one of their prototypes, and the California Highway Patrol or the local police got out to get a ticket, and there was nobody in the car. So they didn't know what to do. It was kind of funny. But nevertheless, this presents, you would think, huge economic opportunities for Ottawa. What are the economic opportunities for Ottawa here? Kelly? Is Kelly there? Or did we lose Kelly?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, Kelly, there you are.
I apologize. There was a really loud noise around me. As I mentioned, I'm at a show, so I just don't want to go off.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yes,
Do you need to go? Do you need to go? Or
No, I'm quite enjoying this conversation. Thank you. So I think that there's a lot of work to be done, right?
Okay.
So the technology is moving fast. People like Elon Musk, they make the changes required, but there's still a lot of things to consider. I mentioned Transport Canada creating policy and regulation around how do you send out information to the vehicles. Security, we work with BlackBerry QNX on a security protocol. When you send a message, they need to be encrypted so the car knows it's trusted and does that secure handshake with the information. Insurance, right? There's a lot of things that need to happen. But yeah, I do think, things are changing and that may become a norm, but it's not going to happen overnight. I do think there's still time. Elon Musk saying 15 years, that actually might be very accurate to go anywhere in Canada, right? I think in cities we'll see autonomy be adopted much quicker and, dedicated areas. And then as we go, as I mentioned, if you need to literally go to the far north of Canada, that may be a good 15 years out where, have a nap in the back seat and you wake up. But yes, I think it's moving quickly. I absolutely.
Kelly, just one quick question here, and then I'll let you go. The fact that we have winter here, is that a benefit for us that we can test these vehicles in inclement weather?
Oh, huge.
Huge?
So, we hear a lot about people testing in Arizona and California, and that's all great. The province of Ontario has done a really good job of setting up a policy for people to test in Ontario. I have to give them great kudos for that. So I think that it's great to make it work in perfect weather, but you need to test in the worst possible test scenario. We're seeing with some of the testing we're doing right now with machine vision sensors, they don't operate the same in heavy rain and fog and snow. They're giving out different information. Work needs to be done to the algorithms behind those sensors to say to the car, if it's raining heavily, then adjust this information by X. So I strongly believe I feel like it's almost the first time I can tell the world the truth about our weather. We get extremes here. It's all right? Minus 40, plus 40 degrees Celsius with humidity, and it's an absolute asset for this work. If it works in Ottawa, it's going to work anywhere.
Okay. Kelly Days, enjoy Detroit and the Autotech Detroit conference, and thanks for taking the time, stepping out to talk to us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rob.
Yeah, bye-bye. Strategic Market Director, Area XO. This is City News.
Is it safe?
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
All right, so 1 week ago was the Ontario election. 1 week ago, it was not the result that the Ontario Liberals were hoping for, but we have one of the local re-elected Liberal MPPs joining us right now, former Ottawa City Councillor Steve Blais. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
How are you these days?
Yeah, very, very good. Thank you. Good. A little tired, right? And obviously, last Thursday was bittersweet for us, but forward we move.
Okay. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yep. I want to ask you. QP Briefing is quoting you this morning. Ottawa Orleans MPP, former City Councillor Steve Blais. I didn't leave a fairly senior position at City Hall to sit in the background for 2 years or 6 years. Please elaborate.
Well, Rob, my history in terms of the work that I did at the city. I was always pushing the envelope to get big investments in Orleans and to make change right across the city and be in a leadership position to help do those things. And I wanted to do the same thing at the province, for the residents of Orleans and to move the entire province forward. And as you mentioned already, the results from last Thursday were quite disappointing. We're not what we thought we're going to be. And as a result, we're now going to be in a process of reflection and renewal and change within the Ontario Liberal Party. And I want to play a leadership role in working towards that change so that we can be in a position to win 4 years from now.
Okay. So does that mean you want to run for the leadership of the Ontario Liberal Party?
Well, I think there's lots of ways you can demonstrate leadership and lots of ways that you can be integral to the success of growing and reshaping the party, and that's what I want to play a key role in doing, and that's what I'm committed to doing while continuing to advocate for the investments we need in Orleans, the investments that we need in the city of Ottawa, and working with the government to get those things done for our community, and holding them accountable when that needs to happen.
Okay. Let me put this another way. Are you mulling a run for the leadership of the Ontario Liberal Party?
Sure, yeah. Look, I think the results are what they were. I think you're almost required to think about it in both a peripheral way and in a serious way. I think I have a lot to bring to the table, but by no means is anything definite or concluded. It's not something that I was anticipating. I thought we would be working towards building and shaping a Liberal government, not working towards how you rebuild the party for 4 years from now. And as I said, I hope to play a leadership role in that rebuilding process.
Okay. What do you think of these musings from Greg Sorbera in the Globe and Mail saying, it's pie in the sky? He admits it's pie in the sky, but if he had his way, there would be no more Ontario Liberal Party or NDP Party, and there would be instead a Liberal Democratic Party of Ontario. What do you think about a merger with the NDP? What would you think of something like that?
Yeah, I think it's really a non-starter. The similarities in recent years of some of the policies, certainly not all the policies, are, I think, a reflection of the challenges that the province faced, not any kind of alignment on broader, world outlook. The NDP are a social democratic party. Liberals are much more pragmatic. We want to invest in services that help people, that help create a social safety net, that invest in schools so we can create the best architects and doctors and lawyers and musicians and laborers and bricklayers and everything that you need to have a strong economy. But the strong economy has to come first in order to build those social safety nets. And so it's a fundamentally different approach to government, and I don't think that any merger is really realistic, to tell you the truth.
Okay. How do you explain the Liberal Party of Ontario's success here, particularly in Ontario, and ridings like yours, Vanier, Ottawa South? How do you explain that? What's going on?
Look, I think we obviously have a strong team here in Ottawa. So we had a strong team right across the province, but particularly here in Ottawa, we have members who have a track record of getting things done for their residents. Lucille Collard was a school trustee for a long time. She was chair of the school board. John, obviously been elected for some time, but before that worked very closely with Dalton McGuinty in his office for many years, helping people in real life. And obviously, I have the experiences that we've already spoken to, and that's reflected in all of our candidates. Ted Hsu in Kingston was a member of Parliament. Mary Margaret McMahon in Beaches was a former city councillor, and so we have a team that has a history of getting things done for the community, of listening to the needs of the community where we live, and working to address those needs, and whether that's getting investments or bringing issues to the forefront. I think residents in these communities, certainly residents of Orleans, are appreciative of that work and effort, and demonstrated that appreciation on Thursday.
Gotcha. Getting it done. It's a catchy slogan, Steve.
Well, it certainly seems to have gotten the attention of Ontario voters, and so now it's our job to hold the government to it. There's lots to get done. This morning there's a report in Ottawa about the number of times Ottawa paramedics have been at level 0. The City of Ottawa has reached out to the province a number of times in recent years. Most recently, I think this spring, the mayor and Matt Luloff wrote to the province asking for help to address level 0 with paramedics. That's when there's absolutely no paramedics left to actually provide service to residents. The government hasn't taken action on that. There are any number of files related to our city that the government has been slow on or not taken any action on, and we're going to hold them accountable to get those things done for Ottawa and get those things done for across Ontario.
Okay. Hey, thanks for the time.
Yeah, thank you.
Good to hear from you. Yeah, you too. Steve Blais, former Ottawa City Councillor, re-elected 1 week ago for the Liberals in Ottawa, Orleans, not ruling out a run for the leadership of the Ontario Liberal Party. Coming up, another look this week at international news. It's The World with Elliot Tepper on City News.
One, two, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Today is a very exciting day. We are officially opening the Interzip Rogers for the summer season of this year. Last year we were expecting to have maybe 20,000 people, and we actually had over 30,000 riders for the first year. So we're really excited to reopen this year.
That was epic and scary!
You have a really different perspective view-wise of the area we're in. So you have a clear view of the Parliament. Obviously, you're crossing the river, and of course, you're moving from a province to another, which is unique of this zip line. It doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. Rogers has been partners even before Interzip opened, actually. They were all in the first meeting we had with Rogers, and that for us was really a nice commitment. We're really fortunate to have Rogers with us, and on top of having Rogers, it's basically the name of the zipline, which is the Interzip Rogers, that is now pretty much renowned across the country.
Rogers Interzip is a great activity for people who live in or visit the National Capital Region. Get out and have an opportunity to zip across the Ottawa River between Ottawa and Outaouais.
Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, June 9th. Good morning, I'm Danielle Bain. Right now in Ottawa and Smiths Falls, it's 14 degrees with some light rain. Here's what's making news this hour. As of Saturday, masks will not be required on public transit and many healthcare settings anymore. Ontario's top doctor, Dr. Kieran Moore, announcing this yesterday, saying the decision was based on high vaccination rates and overall improvements in the COVID-19 situation. Masks will still be required in long-term care homes and retirement homes. Ottawa's medical officer of health, Dr. Vera Etches, is strongly recommending transit riders keep their masks on despite the mandate ending. The inquest examining the deaths of 3 women from the Renfrew County area continues. Carol Culleton, Natalie Warmerdam, and Anastasia Kuzik were all killed by a man known to them, who was also a man with a known history of violence against women. An expert on research into violence against women is telling a coroner's inquest there needs to be more education on intimate partner violence in Ontario. Psychologist Peter Jaffet says that would help prevent tragedies similar to the 2015 deaths of these 3 women. He also recommends the province explore the appropriateness of applying a dangerous and long-term offender designation in high-risk intimate partner violence cases where perpetrators have long-standing patterns of violence and or multiple victims. A U.S. federal investigation will be taking a close look at the police response to last month's mass shooting at an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas. Families of those who were killed have complained about the lack of information from local officials. Attorney General Merrick Garland says the mayor has promised cooperation from every level of law enforcement as the investigation goes on. City News Time, 11:33. I'm Danielle Bain for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
This is our weekly examination of world news stories. It's called The World, with Professor Elliot Tepper, Distinguished Senior Fellow at the Norman Patterson School of International Affairs at Carleton University. Welcome back, Professor.
Oh, thank you. Good morning, Rob.
Okay, let's start again with the war in Ukraine.
Yes.
How fair would it be to say that Russia is using grain as a weapon or food as a weapon? What do you think about that?
Oh, I think that's accurate. Another byproduct of the Russian invasion, totally unprovoked, of a neighboring state is now global food insecurity. They clearly are now in possession physically. They're using stolen Ukrainian grain as a bargaining chip to get what they want in the world. They want to sell the grain which is not theirs, but more importantly, they want to do so in order to open a corridor out of Ukraine on the sea. You cannot ship all this grain sufficiently, we're told, by rail or by trucks. There's just no way that this kind of quantity can go anywhere near what's required except by water. the Russians have taken over or are now blockading the key Ukrainian ports, and they're saying, well, we'll work with everybody. Turkey controls the access to the Black Sea, so we'll work with them. Just everybody demine and create these corridors, and then we will sell Ukrainian wheat to help solve a crisis which they themselves have created.
And we already have this humanitarian catastrophe that's been created by the death and destruction of a neighboring country because of this invasion. The issues of migration and refugees, right, and displacement, right, millions of people displaced, going into countries that are in some cases ill-equipped to take many refugees, and now you have another humanitarian catastrophe because of food insecurity, because, as I understand it, Professor, one of Ukraine's major export markets, Africa, the Middle East, and in East Africa, you have a terrible drought happening right now.
Yes. This is just a political manipulation of a crisis by Russia to deal with just a commanding humanitarian situation. Lebanon, you mentioned the Middle East in particular, but across Africa. And now the question is being put, would you buy this wheat that Russia is having on offer, which is actually Ukrainian wheat that they are illegally selling? And the African states apparently are saying, we've been hearing from this that, we have hunger here. We weren't really on board with the way the West has viewed this in any event, this crisis, but to a leading spokesperson there said, don't preach morality, buy this stuff even though it's stolen Ukrainian wheat, to people who are starving. And that's the kind of dilemma that, once again, on another front, this Russian totally unprovoked invasion of Ukraine is creating around the world.
Terrible, terrible. Do you think there's the capacity for Canada to do something here as a major agricultural producer, exporter?
Yes, we should also remind ourselves that Canada and the United States together are also major exporters of these kinds of food products. Joe Biden last April put a bill, stuck into a bill that he's got before Congress to spend, I think, something like $33 billion to subsidize American producers so that they will double crop and produce a lot more grain so that those then could help alleviate any shortage that's coming on. And Canada, of course, is a major exporter, and we are getting the same kind of exhortation from the President of the U.S., grow more, export more. But Canada, as I've just been reading, apparently weather conditions aren't favorable.
No.
So we are not getting what we need to get into the ground in order to produce more.
Okay. Let's talk about China. China, Canada. There have been news reports that Chinese jets have repeatedly flown so close to a Canadian surveillance plane in the Asia-Pacific region that Canadian pilots could make eye contact with Chinese pilots who have sometimes shown their middle fingers, according to a news report from Global News. Very Top Gun-esque.
Yes.
There have been approximately 60 of these types of interactions with Chinese fighter jets since Christmas. 24 deemed dangerous. Similar reports out of Australia. What is China up to?
What is China up to? Well, too many people are watching Top Gun. It was fun in a movie, but it's extremely dangerous in real life. We have to remind ourselves what's going on. This is Operation Neon, Canada's contribution to the United Nations operation. So the Chinese are buzzing a UN operation.
Okay.
In our case, the Canadian contribution under Operation Neon. This is a sanctions-busting effort by China, and it's part of a much broader pattern, but let's stay with the first part.
Okay.
What's going on there is that the UN has had North Korea under sanctions since 2006, I believe, over their missiles and nuclear tests. So something has to be done to enforce those sanctions. There's been a UN operation. Canada's a contributor to it, a major contributor to it. And that contribution, which has both naval but also this one Aurora taking part, that's what's being challenged by China, saying that basically saying we don't support the UN sanctions regime. So it's really an attack on a UN mission, in a sense, to ward off any inspection. And part of that, Rob, is because it is widely suspected that the sanctions busting that's going on is ship-to-ship transfers of sanctioned oil, on that, or the origin of that oil is China. So scare them off. But the broader pattern here is that this is just one more component of Xi Jinping's wolf warrior aggressiveness. That you mentioned Australia has also been caught by this. But beyond that, remember, Taiwan is just under basically assault because waves of Chinese planes continue to go into their self-identification zone. They're wearing out the Taiwanese Air Force because over and over again they have to rise up to challenge this irresponsible behavior. The possibility of a mistake, of miscalculation, of somebody's temper flaring up and, pushing the trigger. Yeah. All of that is there. So this is China playing a very dangerous game in order to achieve what it wants, which is to supplant the West in Asia, push out the West, and that's what this is about.
Could be very volatile.
Yeah, then to take over basically as the world's #1 power by 2050. So very volatile, very dangerous, very irresponsible.
Right. There's been some speculation. Are they doing this to this Canadian surveillance aircraft because of the Trudeau government's decision on Huawei and 5G? But it's more directly to do with the sanctions on North Korea and enforcing those sanctions.
Yes, and their broader pattern of aggressive behavior. Anything having to do with Huawei in this case would just be a little extra icing on the cake from their view. I think they'd be undertaking this operation anyway.
Okay, when we come back, the Summit of the Americas. Mr. Trudeau is there. Mr. Biden is hosting. We'll be right back. We have Professor Elliot Tepper. This is The World with Professor Elliot Tepper. I'm Rob Snow. This is The Rob Snow Show on City News.
Of Royale Equestrian Center. This is Diamond. She's a 10-year-old thoroughbred. She used to be a racehorse and then made the transition to a riding horse. She loves jumping, and she's used for our more advanced students. So we started the farm 14 years ago with my mom and brother. My brother was actually driving by one day and saw the sign, and we applied. There were 60 applicants, and we got it. When we first started, there was not very much here, so our property's about 25 acres, and there was just this 100-year-old barn. And from there, we built onto it. We fixed up one stall at a time, one paddock at a time. We added one horse at a time, and slowly it built into what it is today. Every year, we're improving and trying to continue to build. And most recently, we added 2 shed-row barns this year. I love horses. I've been obsessed with horses since I was a little girl. The first time I got to ride, I was 4 years old, and I just loved it. My mom thought it was going to be a phase, and that phase never ended. I kept riding all through high school, and then eventually, started Royale Equestrian Center. It was my dream to always own a farm and to build a place that I could share my passion for horses with others and do the same thing for the kids that the horses did for me. So I absolutely love it. It's a dream come true. COVID hit, that was challenging. I was pretty stressed, especially the first few months, trying to figure out how are we going to navigate all of this. Our business is based on people coming in. We don't make much revenue if there's nobody coming in to ride. So that was really challenging. And then the other aspect of it was how are we going to care for all these horses if we're fully shut down and there's no income coming in. So we worked really hard. Some of our team were so kind to actually just come in and volunteer and help us out. And we made through it. We got through it. It's been hard and a lot of work, but it's also shown us how resilient we can be. So I'm happy with how we're coming out of COVID. Hopefully this is, we're nearing the end of all the shutdowns, but we've, survived it and now we're starting to thrive again, which is great. So we have a great team. We have about 14 coaches, and then we have all our regular barn staff. We have our maintenance manager and crew, and if it weren't for them, we wouldn't be able to do this. It takes a huge amount of people, and then we also have a volunteer program. The volunteer program, it helps with us, especially with our beginner program, so they help with tacking up the horses and caring for the horses when we're really busy, and then they also get to gain some work experience. We take co-op students on. We're quite a busy and vibrant place, and it takes a lot of people to make it work, even through to behind the scenes from our accountants, my family, who are always stepping in to help out. It takes a small village.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
We are back, part 2 of The World. Our look at international news with the help of Professor Elliot Tepper, Distinguished Senior Fellow, Norman Patterson School, International Affairs. Just reading about Los Angeles. Los Angeles is hosting the Summit of the Americas, which has... its history goes back to the Clinton administration, as I understand it. Los Angeles, though, to a couple of quick facts here. This is right from state.gov, the U.S. State Department. Los Angeles is the busiest port in the Western Hemisphere, and it is the third largest consular corps in the world. Wow. So it's a global city, Los Angeles, of course, but second largest city in the United States. 224
document. It's the Hispanic population is the proportion of Hispanic population is very high there.
Yeah, largest Hispanic Latino community in the United States. 224 languages spoken. Incredible. So certainly a worthy host city of something like this. So what is it? The Summit of the Americas.
Yes, the Summit of the Americas, as you pointed out correctly, reading the same documents we are. President Clinton invented this and called it together in 1994 to, quote, to promote economic growth and prosperity throughout the Americas based on shared democratic values and the promise of increased trade and commerce to improve the quality of life for all peoples, etc. So this is an organization that was willed into existence by the U.S., and it meets every 3 or 4 years. It's the first time that the U.S. has headed this since it was founded, so it's only the second time. Quebec City, by the way, we hosted this in 2001. Oh. It's an organization meant to bring together the heads of government to deal with the pressing issues of the day, and that's what's happening right now. And our Prime Minister, of course, is there.
Yes, he is there. Yes, he is. He's, in fact, he's meeting with the governor of California today about climate change. And then later on his itinerary, the Prime Minister will actually have a meeting with the CEO of Google.
Yeah.
So he's meeting some heavy hitters, bilateral meeting with the American president today, which would be, that'll be the most important thing on his agenda. When you have a bilateral with the leader of the free world.
And our major partner.
You know, nothing bigger than that, right, Professor?
Yeah.
Right, to sit down.
Bilateral meetings or side meetings are often a feature of these large gatherings. That's certainly been the case for Canada. And on the way to this meeting, the Prime Minister and our Defense Minister stopped off at NORAD and met the U.S. Defense Secretary, General Austin. So on the way down, I think something that's going to get lost if we don't pay attention to it, was also very significant. So this is the only joint operation in the world that has a joint command, and I think Canada is likely to update and spend a lot more money on NORAD in the near future. So already on the way down there, this was happening. The meeting itself does bring together all of these countries. You probably want to ask about the ones that aren't there.
Yeah. It's interesting because the Mexican president is not there.
Yes.
Leading a boycott because, as I understand it, the President Biden does not want the participation of Cuba, Venezuela, or Nicaragua.
Correct.
Yeah.
the situation is very complicated because Canada has long had a different relationship with Cuba than the U.S. I think this is related in part to the broad theme that, only democracy should be taking part, but also I think the political anthropology of Florida has very deeply engaged here. The President of the United States is not keen to have Cuba there. The question of Nicaragua then figures into that. I think a lot of this is domestic U.S. politics relating to Florida. But what's interesting is Venezuela is not there, but neither is Juan Guaido. Under our leadership, Canadian leadership, the Lima Group has long recognized the opposition leader in Venezuela as the official legitimate leader of that beleaguered country, and instead Maduro was not there. By the way, Mexico is represented. It's just not represented by the president. By the president. And one of the interesting things I think about this is it shows, I think, that the Monroe Doctrine has long gone. The Monroe Doctrine, President Monroe said basically, Latin America is our backyard, and everybody else will stay out, hands off. This meeting demonstrates that that's not the case. America is no longer the commanding force in all of the Americas, up and down from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego, as it's being put. I like that one geographically. But China has been making major inroads into Latin America in various of the states in various ways. Russia is also showing some interest in some of the states. So this is an effort, I think, to assert American leadership once again and to deal with important questions, climate change, inclusive growth, all of these things, what to do about business, basically getting over the pandemic and getting on with a renewal of trade and economic prosperity. All of that's on the agenda, and our Prime Minister is taking part. But it is a signal that the U.S. wants to have perhaps another buffer against a rising China and is asserting its leadership in this fashion.
Okay. All right. If you want to watch Law & Order tonight in the United States, you're probably out of luck. The big American TV networks have cleared their primetime schedules. All the cable news networks are going to air it, save Fox News. Fox News says it will jump in when news warrants, okay?
Yep.
The broadcast of the hearings of the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th Capitol attack, premiere episode tonight, the first of 8 hearings to be aired. What is the purpose of these hearings?
We're talking really about the future of power and perhaps even democracy in the United States, our leading partner and our neighbor, the world's longest undefended border. What's going on here is that the Republicans are now going to resist any, well, I'll put it differently since you mentioned Fox News. Part of the Trump restoration is that Fox is not going to broadcast to its constituency, which is, the core Republican constituency. The Democrats are trying to bring forth the centrality of Donald Trump in an insurrection, really sedition, and they're going to try to document this in prime time, showing America that there was an attempt to stop an illegal, seditious attempt to block the peaceful transfer of power after an election, the core building, foundation of American democracy. So democracy itself is being put on display through these 8 hearings. Will anybody watch is the question.
Yeah, that's a big question. It's such a busy news cycle. Even President Biden has admitted my number one issue is the cost of living and inflation. So it'll be interesting. They're certainly trying to build it up, though, as this could be the next Watergate hearings of 1973, which really did grip the nation. Howard Baker and what did the president know and when did he know it? The whole thing. I mean, that was, you're of that vintage, Professor. I mean, that was the show. That was the biggest show in town, the Watergate hearings, right?
Something like 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 Americans who were watching TV watched that.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen this time, in part because Fox is blocking out a portion of the population. Yes, what did he know and when did he know it? What was the president's role, not just on that day, but leading up to that day? Mike Pence, remember, was hustled out of harm's way because there were people apparently attacking in order to find him and maybe hang him.
Yeah.
The vice president, the loyal vice president under Donald Trump. So this will be an attempt to not relitigate the past, but to demonstrate the threat to democracy and to wake people up to that threat. That's the intention, and they're going to do it in. They're showing footage that hasn't been seen. They're hearing testimony from people that have not testified publicly. It's to refocus by the Democrats in particular. But remember, Liz Cheney is co-chair of that committee.
Right.
And she's a formidable force. So it's an attempt by the committee to lay out the actual facts of what was going on to the degree they've been able to
that it was a deliberate attempt. That it was a deliberate attempt by Trump to hold on to power, to make sure that the Congress did not certify that election. A lot of people have the opinion that, okay, there may have even been some organization, but it was basically a protest that got out of hand and turned violent. But know that it was organized and it was a deliberate attempt to make sure Congress did not certify the election so that Trump could maintain power conceivably for who knows how long. That's what they're going to try and make the case. I think that's the case they're going to try and make.
Yes, and as part of one component, one striking component of a much broader pattern of the attempt to hold on to power illegally, to obstruct justice, to prevent the peaceful transfer of an election he lost. And a significant portion of the Republican Party believes that the election was stolen. The I don't know how to put this gently in terms of Fox News, but they are clearly active participants in presenting the fact that you were probably watching as I was. At the time of the attack, the assault on America's Capitol building, Fox News was saying, oh no, these aren't Trump people. These are Antifa people. I mean, they turned on a dime. And now the story is being put out that really this was maybe a false flag operation by the FBI in order to clamp down on true patriots. So all of this conspiracy theory, conspiracy mongering, and you put it accurately as to what the Republicans want to now say is it's just something that got out of hand accidentally, that there was no coordination, there was no planning. But it is a key part, an elemental part of a much broader pattern of attempting to hold power after you've lost an election by the President of the United States.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.